Chapter 291. Where's the goods from the east? Soren turned around and asked the people around him. Immediately, someone led him to the back. Soon, a pile of carefully placed goods appeared in front of him. Without even looking, one could tell that it was filled with porcelain. It was a very precious commodity. On the continent, exquisite porcelain was sometimes more popular than silver. At the same time, because porcelain was easily broken, it was easy to have accidents during transportation. Therefore, the price of exquisite porcelain had always been high. Although there were some porcelain crafts on the continent, only porcelain from the East was the best. Only authentic porcelain from the East could be sold at a relatively high price. It was just like how wine tasters like to pursue the origin of the wine. Why are there so many broken? Soren glanced at it and frowned. He said in a deep voice, "Almost all the boxes here are broken." Hearing Soren's words, the pirate leader behind him immediately broke out in cold sweat. He braced himself and said, "The idiot below was careless and fell when he was transporting it. I've already hung him up and gave him 20 lashes. If you're not satisfied, I'll punish them later." "Forget it." Soren waved his hand and said slowly, "Since they've already been punished, forget it." He looked at the porcelain in front of him and then turned to the box next to it containing spices, tea leaves, and silk. The goods from the East were quite valuable. He came here not only to sell them, but also to bring some gifts for Gloria. In the past, she helped Soren and Vivian a lot. In the past, he didn't have the ability to express his gratitude to her. However, Soren was now one of the pirate kings of the South Coast. This time, he invited her to go overseas empty-handed. Courtesy demands reciprocity. In essence, Soren still had a lot of traditions from the past. Gloria probably wouldn't need the other gifts, but the spices, tea leaves, and silk from the East were definitely useful to her. This was because wizards like spices and tea leaves. Many things that had the effect of calming one's mind were helpful for wizards to learn and understand spells. As for silk, it was needless to say. In this era where the overall level of civilization was close to the Middle Ages, silk was something that most women couldn't refuse. "Take all of these and transport them out." Soren glanced at them and picked out the best ones. Then, he ordered his men to move them out. This batch of goods was quite high-end. Soren opened the 2 boxes and looked through them. He found a mermaid symbol in the corner of the box. Of course, this was not a mermaid. In fact, it looked more like a mermaid from the East. This thing was called a mermaid in the East. It was completely different from the fishman in the West. This symbol represented a very powerful force in the Eastern world. It controlled nearly 60% of the trade in the Eastern world. Whether it was goods transported through the desert on land or by sea, most of them had to be purchased from the cities under their control. This organization was quite strange. Soren had interacted with them before, and there were many experts among them. In addition, these Easterners were not afraid of the drows at all. They were also one of the few humans who would trade directly with the underground drows, even if this kind of trade was relatively hidden and not many. Soren quickly picked out the gift. He didn't stay on Snake Island for long. After preparing the gift for Gloria, Soren took his men to Port Tylon. Now that he was back, he had to meet the Naga Siren priest. Otherwise, she might be dissatisfied. If he didn't come to see her, she might think that Soren was arrogant. After all, she was the presiding priest of the South Coast. In Port Tylon and the cities close to the mainland, the influence of the Naga Siren priest was still very strong. Soren still needed the power of the Sea Temple. It didn't take too much time to go to Port Tylon. In the afternoon, Soren arrived at Port Tylon with his men. The approach of the battleship did not alarm too many people, but there were still some leaders of the Chamber of Commerce who learned of Soren's return. Some of them were ready to come and meet him, just like how Soren wanted to meet the Naga Siren priest. As soon as Soren arrived at the port of Port Tylon, he ordered others to send his gift to the Sea Temple. Then he was ready to stay here for one night, and then set off for Shipwreck Bay. When it was time to send a gift, he still had to send one. Even if Soren forced the Naga siren priest to give in and bow her head at the beginning, now that things were over, if there was a chance to ease the relationship, he still had to win her over a little. If Soren wanted to gain a foothold on the south coast, he must hold on to the golden thigh of the sea goddess. As long as he held on to the golden thigh of the sea goddess, even if it was a big thing, the sea temple would share some of the pressure for him. Soren was willing to serve the sea goddess. Wasn't it because he wanted to enjoy the shade under a big tree? Of course. It was not enough to just hold on to a big tree. Soren's ultimate goal was to make himself a big tree. As soon as the pirate who sent the gift left, the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Port Tylon came over and brought gifts one by one. These guys had a lot of eyes and ears. Pirates always liked to leak information, so it was not surprising that they knew about Soren's return. For the arrival of these guys, Soren knew clearly in his heart, because what they wanted was nothing more than the black market smuggling trade and a new route to the outer islands. These things could not be given to them. The reason why Soren did not attack merchant ships and was able to support so many of his men was because he had a firm grasp on the smuggling trade. The profit in it was quite amazing. Soren now had more than 2,000 pirates and Chamber of Commerce sailors under his command. These people ate and drank gold and silver from the smuggling trade. The protection fee at sea was not enough to support these people. As for the other route to the outer islands, Soren could not share it with them. In the future, this would be a way to make money. A meaningless greeting. Soren had a smile on his face as he dealt with people from all walks of life. He accepted all the gifts that were sent over, but he did not reply to any of them who wanted to inquire about overseas trade routes, or to probe into smuggling trade and so on. This attitude made many people helpless. Many people could only leave the gifts and leave with disappointment. Time passed like this for a quarter of an hour. When Soren finished dealing with the heads of these Chamber of Commerce, suddenly a strange figure appeared behind him. Then a cold light appeared, and a strange knife pierced through his back and directly hit Soren's heart. Blood splattered out of the wound. Soren's figure stiffened for a moment, and then his face showed a trace of pain. The knife pierced his heart. Chapter 292. No one knew when the assassin appeared. Even Soren didn't notice it. The enemy's strength was a little beyond his estimation. It wasn't until the moment before the enemy stabbed him that Soren realized that someone had ambushed him. His powerful dodging ability and amazing physical fitness made him want to avoid the attack from behind, but it was too late. Because he didn't have the ability, danger sense, the moment he was ready to dodge, the enemy had already stabbed him in the back. The tip of the sword pierced his back, and it was impossible to dodge. At that moment, countless thoughts flashed through Soren's mind, but in the end, the will to survive dominated his body. When the enemy stabbed him in the back, he instantly activated stone skin, but the tip of the sword still pierced through his muscles and pierced his heart. At that moment, Soren could only activate slaughter transformation at the same time. Then, in the next moment, his body began to undergo a shocking change. His racing heartbeat squeezed out his blood, and in less than a millisecond, his entire body's quality was greatly improved. Then, he entered the Son of Slaughter form. The tip of the sword pierced his heart. Soren's body stiffened for a moment. The feeling of his heart being pierced was so painful that it made him lose some of his strength. However, the additional ability of the Son of Slaughter form had been activated. The person who assassinated Soren seemed to be a legendary assassin, because only a legendary assassin could get close to Soren without him noticing. However, as an assassin, the enemy's strength didn't seem to be high. The tip of the sword that should have pierced through Soren's heart was stuck after it pierced his heart under the effect of stone skin and slaughter transformation. His strength was exhausted. Soren's muscles clamped the enemy, and then when the enemy was about to twist the sword and crush his heart, a cold light appeared in the palm of Soren's hand. Then, the legendary curved sword, Icing Death, appeared in his hand and directly slashed at the enemy's throat. This was a fierce counterattack. Obviously, the legendary assassin who tried to assassinate Soren hesitated for a moment. In his mind, Soren was almost a dead target, so he certainly didn't want to die together with Soren. So, the enemy took 3 steps back, pulled out his dagger, and dodged Soren's attack at the same time. Tsk tisk. The assassin let out a mocking exclamation. From the outside, he looked like an ordinary sailor, but Soren knew that this was not the enemy's true face. In front of him was an assassin who was proficient in disguise. This was an uncommon type of basic skill. Compared to the disguise that could be removed by magic, this kind of disguise that relied on craftsmanship was more exquisite. The legendary assassin stared at Soren in front of him, licked his lips and said, "You're still alive after being stabbed in the heart. You really have a tenacious life force. No wonder that person was willing to pay me a high price to kill you. But how long can you last with this kind of injury?" The assassin's eyes were cold and full of murderous intent. He was also looking for Soren's weakness. This was because he felt a sense of danger when he transformed into the slaughterer. Soren's pupils turned blood red. Blood flowed out of his back, but the muscles he controlled temporarily stopped the bleeding. Soren would not die from excessive blood loss in a short period of time. He was now like the Knoll hunter who was successfully assassinated by Soren. At that time, Soren also stabbed the Knoll hunter's heart, but because the Knoll hunter's vitality was too tenacious and his constitution was more than 20 points, he did not die immediately. He held on for a while before dying from excessive blood loss. A row of blood-red data appeared. "You're under attack. You've been stabbed in the back by the enemy. You've received 126 piercing damage. You've received 21 shadow damage. You've been stabbed in the heart. You've triggered the test of death. You've successfully passed the test of death. You've entered a heavily injured state. You've entered a heavily bleeding state. Your remaining vitality will be drained quickly." A backstab. Even with Soren's extraordinary constitution of 22 points, plus the 2 points bonus from the slaughterer transformation, and the defensive effect of the stoneskin spell, he still could not reduce the enemy's damage by much. This stab directly entered a heavily injured state. Even if he temporarily passed the test of death, being stabbed in the heart meant that he would quickly enter a near-death state and eventually die. "I can't die here." This was the only thought in Soren's mind. Then, the willpower that he had been training for a long time began to show its effect. Soren suppressed the pain in his body, and also suppressed the fear of death. His brain worked quickly in an instant, and in a short moment, he found a chance for himself to survive. At the same time, he also found a chance to counterattack. The Sea Temple. As long as he could escape to the Sea Temple, the Naga Siren priest could heal his injury. Although this kind of fatal injury was very scary, as long as Soren could be saved from the jaws of death. The injury to the heart was completely healed, and the bleeding injury was nothing at all. As long as Soren escaped to the Sea Temple, even if his heart was destroyed, he would not die because greater restoration could even regenerate the heart. Now, the Naga Siren priest would definitely not sit back and watch him die. The two sides were currently on the same front. If there was no Soren as the knife in her hand, the Naga Siren priest would eventually be alone, and her life would definitely not be better than now. Escape. He must escape from there. Only a high-grade priest could heal his fatal injury. But where would he get the chance to escape? How could the enemy in front of him let him escape? He had such a heavy injury on his body. The chance of escaping from the enemy's hands was quite low. Not to mention that there was still a long way to go from here to the Sea Temple. Fear. Instant cast, summon shadow. Evade sight. Shadow jump. Soren launched several abilities in a row in an instant. First, it was an instant cast of fear brought by a weak divinity, then he summoned a shadow, and then his whole person disappeared into the shadow. But this time, Soren was not trying to fight back against the enemy, but to escape from the enemy's attack. His figure appeared from a shadow in the distance, and then he instantly drank a bottle of expensive healing potion and fled in the direction of the Sea Temple. The Naga Siren priest had given him a high-grade healing potion, which could temporarily prolong Soren's death. Chapter 293. You want to run? A cold light appeared in the eyes of the legendary assassin. His figure suddenly jumped back into the shadows, but he did not enter stealth. Instead, his body directly blended into the shadows, then disappeared in the next moment, and then appeared about 30 meters ahead. This strange assassin's silhouette appeared in the shadows, but he did not stay in the same place for too long. In just a moment, he disappeared again and then appeared in the shadows very close to Soren. Shadow Leap. This was a special ability that legendary rogues could master. It was similar to the effect of Shadow Leap, but they did not need to enter stealth. As long as they were in the shadows, legendary rogues could perform space jumps across planes. The effect was similar to the wizard's blink spell. This special ability belonged to the category of supernatural ability. It had a certain distance of space jumps, but there was no limit to the number of times it could be used. Under normal circumstances, legendary rogues could perform a shadow leap of up to 100 meters a day. This supernatural ability was similar to the short-distance blink spell. It could be divided into 10 meters and then used 10 times. And there was no need to enter stealth, as long as the body was in the shadows. Until now. Soren's pirates finally reacted, but they were of no use in this legendary battle. By the time they were ready to rush over to help Soren, the two of them had already used their supernatural abilities to rush hundreds of meters away. The injury on Soren's back was very serious. The violent movement accelerated his blood loss. Even if he had a strong regenerative ability, he could not regenerate his heart. At this moment, a stream of blood gushed out from his back, almost dyeing his whole back red. The enemy was still gradually closing the distance. Perhaps because of the approaching death, Soren's perception ability was also pushed to the limit. He could feel that the enemy was just a dozen meters behind him, and was still catching up with him little by little. Because the enemy seemed to have some legendary item in his hand that could buff him in an instant, similar to instant escape and haste. In this case, Soren's chances of escaping were quite low, so he made a decision in an instant and rushed directly to the place where there were many people in the distance. Thump thump. After Soren's figure passed by, the crowd was in chaos for a moment, and then people and horses were thrown off their feet. The carriage in the middle of the road suddenly seemed to have gone mad, and the horses pulling the carriage neighed and rushed forward. There was a knife mark on the horse's buttocks. When Soren passed through the horse, he made a cut with his knife. Then, the whole street was in chaos. Several people were sent flying by the galloping horses. No one knew if they were dead or alive after they landed on the ground, but the panicked crowd had achieved the effect Soren wanted. Soren's figure was temporarily blocked by the rushing carriages and the fleeing crowd. The enemy was slightly slower in catching up to him. Do you think you can escape like this? The eerie figure shuttled through the crowd, avoiding most of the things that were in his way. Occasionally, there would be pedestrians blocking his path. A cold light would appear in his palm, and then a corpse would be left behind. Soren's injuries were too severe. Wherever he walked, there would be bloodstains. The enemies behind him could use this to lock onto his position, even if they had temporarily put some distance between them. Bang! Soren's figure rushed into a narrow alleyway. In just a breath's time, another eerie figure appeared and rushed into the alleyway as well. He had a playful expression on his face, like a cat trying to catch a mouse. He seemed to enjoy Soren's final struggle because he was certain that Soren would not be able to escape from his grasp. However, when he rushed into the alleyway, what he saw was not Soren's back. Instead, he saw a pair of eyes filled with murderous intent, as if they were about to strike back at him. Swoosh! When the enemy behind Soren rushed into the alleyway, a faint cold light suddenly appeared, and the enemy's figure froze for a moment. Blow dart +3. A steel needle that was almost difficult to catch with the naked eye flew out. Before the legendary assassin in front of him could react, he was hit on the spot by Soren's sudden attack. Life and death were decided in this moment. The legendary tier assassin only felt a slight pain in his body, and then he could no longer feel anything. Even though he knew that he had fallen into Soren's trap, he did not care at all. He was still prepared to kill Soren first. In his opinion, a steel needle was not enough to kill him. However, He had only taken a few steps when his body began to feel that something was wrong. His speed had obviously slowed down, and his body was quite stiff when he moved. In the end, he almost staggered and fell to the ground. Damn it! The legendary tier assassin's face showed a trace of despair and panic because he found that his body was getting stiffer and stiffer. What the hell is this? It's actually so powerful. He was hit. Soren's figure turned around in an instant, and then a cold light appeared in his palm, directly striking the enemy in front of him. As a former legendary thief, Soren knew the weaknesses of rogues too well. Although rogues had all kinds of mysterious means and various special skills, they were still one thing that could not be changed. One thing that could never be changed was that they did not have as many terrible spells as wizards, and they did not have as strong resistance as warriors. Even now that Soren had accumulated 22 constitution, it was difficult for him to compare with a warrior of the same level in terms of fortitude. Therefore, if even he could not pass the +3 fortitude skill, the enemy in front of him would at most have less than a 50% chance of passing the +3 fortitude skill. Half and half. Life and death depended on whether the enemy's constitution was strong enough. In the past, when many quasi-legendary tier and legendary tier professions were exploring the outer islands, they failed miserably because of these blow darts. From the beginning, Soren planned to fight back. He wanted to bet on whether he could use the blow darts to knock down the enemy in front of him. Plop! The legendary tier assassin in front of Soren suddenly stiffened and almost fell to the ground. Such an opportunity was absolutely impossible for Soren to miss, so when the enemy in front of him lost his balance, the curved sword in his hand also drew a cold light. Sword form, beheading. Blood spurted out, and the head fell to the ground, its eyes wide open. Soren's figure gasped for breath for a moment, then shook slightly as if he was a little unstable. Chapter 294. He didn't care about the corpse on the ground. Soren staggered out of the alley without looking at the legendary loot on the corpse. His vision was a little blurry, and everything he saw seemed to be shaking. There seemed to be some data flashing in front of his eyes, but due to excessive blood loss, his brain began to become unclear. Soren felt more and more difficult to breathe, and the strength in his body was gradually draining away. If it weren't for a strong will supporting his body, he would have fallen down long ago. A row of data appeared, health points reduced to less than 90%. You've entered a state of near death. In a state of continuous bleeding. You will die in 30 seconds. You passed the test of death in a state of near death. You've acquired part of the special ability, Death's Toughness. Soren's vision became more and more blurry. His vitality was gradually draining away, but he was not willing to die like this. Because he couldn't die yet, and he shouldn't die in the hands of such an enemy. In the Avatar crisis, there were many legends and gods. He had experienced so many life and death killings along the way. He had even fought with the great divine power twice. Now, how could he be so easily killed by a legendary professional? He had already reached a higher level than before. As long as he was given a little time, Soren believed that he could be countless times stronger than he was at his peak in the past. Piercing his heart was depriving him of his vitality. Even the weak divinity couldn't heal Soren's injury, because this kind of injury was fatal for many high-grade demons. Unless the divinity was strong enough to ignore the body, the heart was still a fatal weakness of flesh and blood. Soren's vitality was on the verge of death. His strength was getting weaker and weaker, and his spirit was getting more and more tired. It seemed that he could fall down at any time. But he was still moving forward slowly. Everything he had experienced in the past, his will that was tempered by walking barefoot for thousands of miles, and his worry and reluctance for Vivian made him not fall down easily. Then, he heard a person's voice. As if the last of his potential had been squeezed out, Soren suddenly opened his eyes. His pupils were glowing with a blood-red light, and the person who appeared in front of him seemed to be a woman. Soren could no longer see the man's face clearly, but he could feel the man's nervousness. Anyone would be shocked to see a man covered in blood walking out of an alley. The woman seemed to be an Amazon warrior. When she saw Soren, she was very alert and was ready to pull out her weapon. But at this time, Soren suddenly sped up and rushed toward her. Sorry. Soren seemed to have exhausted the last of his strength. After squeezing out all his potential, he gently said sorry, then pointed his finger at the Amazon woman who happened to appear nearby. Vampiric touch. As Soren's finger touched the woman's body, a strong vitality was transferred from the Amazon woman's body to Soren's body. The wound on his back seemed to have healed a lot, and even the pierced heart seemed to have healed a little. This was the effect of spell control. Soren was trying his best to control the vitality absorbed by the spell to transfer to the position of his heart, using it to heal the vital part of his heart that was pierced by the enemy. Soren's breathing gradually became stronger, and everything in front of him became clearer. A trace of blood even appeared on his originally pale face. He was close to death, but because of this spell, he was forcibly pulled back to a seriously injured state. Even his pierced heart was still bleeding. Vampiric touch, minor divinity. When activating this talent, you can condense negative energy to erode the enemy's vitality and temporarily transfer it to yourself. After activating this ability, any enemy directly touched by you will lose divinity plus spell power, *3 HP that you have. A maximum of 60 HP will be absorbed. These HP will be transferred to your body and heal your injuries. If the amount of HP exceeds your HP, the HP will be retained for 1 hour, increasing your maximum HP. The effect of this spell cannot be stacked. The target may die directly because of the exhaustion of vitality. This ability will increase with the level of divinity. Once per day. Bang! A cold corpse fell to the ground. As Soren's injuries gradually healed, the Amazon woman in front of him became weaker and weaker. Finally, her whole face seemed to have lost its luster, and her skin became pale and dim. Finally, she completely stopped breathing. Vampiric touch was a necromancy spell, and it was also one of the few spells that wizards could use to heal themselves. This spell could kill the enemy. If the vitality absorbed exceeded the limit of the enemy, then the target would be completely sucked dry and die. Soren had strengthened his divinity to minor divinity. With his current divinity, casting this spell could almost achieve the maximum effect, and the Amazon woman in front of him didn't seem to have more than 60 HP. So she died. Soren said sorry before reaching out to touch her because he knew that it was difficult for people who had their vitality absorbed by him to survive. But he didn't regret it. Although this seemed to be the first time he took away an irrelevant life in order to let himself live. There was no time to think about it. The wound in Soren's heart had not completely healed. As long as it didn't heal, his vitality would continue to drain. Soren didn't look at the corpse on the ground and directly rushed in the direction of the sea temple. There was still time. After using the spell, Vampiric Touch, to drain the woman's vitality, Soren could at least hold on for a while. I can't die. I can't die. I can't die here. There was only one thought left in Soren's mind, that was, he couldn't die so easily because the Avatar crisis hadn't come yet and Vivian's fate hadn't changed. If he died here, it would be difficult for the little girl to survive in the cruel battle. The obsession to live was so strong. It was so strong that Soren had nightmares all night. When he opened his eyes the next day, he found himself naked in a pool of blue seawater. In front of him was the Naga siren priest who closed her eyes. When she noticed that Soren had woken up, she slowly opened her eyes, then raised her hand and threw a golden coin to him, and said in a deep voice, "You owe me a favor. The other things on the assassin's body are my rewards. This gold coin seems to be a bit special. Only when it is close to you will there be a faint magic aura. Maybe it will be more useful for you." Chapter 295. Snap. Soren reached out and caught the gold coin. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but he seemed to feel a slight electric current. Then it seemed that there was nothing, and the gold coin in his hand became almost the same weight as the other kindlers. Soren stood up in the blue pool. He looked at his naked body, then reached out and stroked his back. He could feel the new muscles where his heart was. Without the countless guilds in the past, there were fewer and fewer high-grade priests that could be trained. In the whole south coast area, the only high-grade priest that Soren knew was the Naga Siren priest in front of him. He didn't know what to do during the Avatar crisis. Without a high-grade priest, the casualties would be terrible. If it was in the past, he wouldn't be so embarrassed with such an injury. The priest in the team would immediately cast a restoration spell and he would be able to fight again. But now? He was forced to use the vampiric touch to extend his life, and finally, he was lucky enough to reach the Sea Temple. In the past, even when Soren was alone, he could meet some priests that were trained in other guilds from time to time. After all, priests were the core of the lineup, and they were absolutely indispensable. In this way, if he was injured, he could spend more money to save him. But now, he couldn't even find a priest. It was quite difficult to meet a second-grade priest outside. "I owe you a favor." Soren stood up slowly. His things were placed on the side of the hall, and it seemed that no one had touched them. However, the legendary assassin's things seemed to have been taken away by the Naga Siren priest. Soren couldn't say anything about it. After all, it was her restoration spell that saved his life. Soren was actually feeling very bad now. For the first time, he urgently found that he needed to find a priest who could cast high-grade divine spells as a teammate. Because if he didn't have such a priest by his side, it was almost impossible for him not to be injured if he encountered a powerful enemy. If he was still injured like today, even if he relied on fortitude to resist the test of death, he would still die in the hands of the enemy in the end. This time, against a legendary enemy. Soren had relied entirely on luck. He had relied on the fact that the blow darts of the Aborigines had a very high degree of immunity. In the past, it had also caused some legendary professions to fail miserably. Only then did he seize the opportunity to kill the enemy. It could be said that if it weren't for the blowdart +3, Soren's chances of survival would have been quite low. After all, the enemy was a pure legendary level rogue. The disadvantages of having a part-time job were now apparent. Soren was a level 10 rogue, but he didn't even notice when the enemy had sneaked up behind him. This was the difference between pure classes and subclasses. Subclasses didn't have any obvious shortcomings, but they also couldn't develop to the limit in a certain field. Once they encountered a pure class enemy, they would be left far behind. Soren's rogue level was only half of the opponent's, and his wizard level was not enough to play a supporting role, which was why he was so passive this time. Soren got up and put on his clothes, then bowed slightly to the priest in front of the hall before leaving. Then, he left the Sea Temple. After Soren's figure had completely left, another hazy figure appeared. It seemed to be some kind of strange sea creature. "Your Excellency." The hazy sea creature looked out of the hall and said in a hoarse voice, "Is this the new pirate king who killed the Swamp King? Didn't he make things difficult for you some time ago? Why don't you take the opportunity to kill him? It's just right to control his pirates, so our power will be strengthened." The Naga Siren priest frowned, then looked at the other party coldly and said slowly, "The real value is him. Not the group of trash under him. Besides, if he dies, who will help me deal with Asrid? You?" Speaking of this, the Naga Siren priest's face showed a hint of sarcasm and said, "Go back. You are all good at fighting for power, but none of you really dare to fight with Asrid. In my opinion, only he can kill that damn Asrid. Pirate King Asrid. At least before getting rid of this thorn, she couldn't let Soren die like this." Moreover, on the corpse of the legendary assassin, the Naga Siren priest also saw a letter of entrustment. The contents of the letter were needless to say. After reading it, the Naga Siren priest was mad. She couldn't let Soren die like this. At the same time, she strengthened her determination to support Soren. However, this letter couldn't be shown to Soren yet. It was a very useful tool. When she was ready to kill Asrid in the future, the Naga Siren priest believed that as long as she showed this assassination letter to Soren, he would never let go of Asrid. Soren left the Sea Temple. Such a life and death experience made the pressure in his heart much stronger. He was also deeply aware of his own lack of strength. As time went on, the chances of legendary professions appearing would become higher and higher. Now, there were already legendary assassins to assassinate him. Would the chance of meeting other legendary professions in the future be far? Legendary professions were a ticket. Without this ticket, he would not be qualified to control his own destiny in the future. Soren felt that he had too many things to do, but there was not enough time at all. It seemed that after dealing with the recent matters and laying the foundation of the base in the outer islands, it was necessary for him to go to the Underdark. This was the place Soren was most familiar with. It should also be the easiest place to reach the legendary level in the material plane. He had to go and meet those drows again. Because only in the dangerous Underdark, there were so many monsters that Soren could harvest enough slaughter EXP to reach the legendary level as soon as possible. Until Soren returned to his warship. He had time to check the data that appeared. Killing the legendary assassin gave him more than 27,000 slaughter EXP. Sure enough, it was a legendary enemy. The slaughter EXP was much higher than other enemies. Soren now accumulated about 5,000 slaughter EXP to level up as a wizard. Legendary was a watershed. Basically, killing a legendary creature would give more than 10 or 20,000 slaughter EXP. In the entire material plane, if there was a place where legendary creatures gathered the most, then the Underdark would definitely be at the top. Because there were beholders, mind flayers, drows, and all kinds of quite dangerous creatures. Because of Soren's understanding of the Underdark, it was slightly easier for him to deal with these creatures than with legendary professions. The warship soon set sail. Although Soren had just walked between life and death, he still calmly ordered to move towards Shipwreck Bay, as if the assassination yesterday did not happen at all. As for what he was thinking deep in his heart, perhaps only he knew. Chapter 296. The Frost Kingdom, Arendelle. Princess Anna's pretty figure stood at the top of the castle, looking down at the city in front of her. At this moment, the temperature had begun to warm up, and the ice and snow were showing signs of melting. Arendelle was still as lively as before, but there was a tense and depressing atmosphere spreading in the palace. This was something that had never happened before, but now the whole castle was heavily guarded. Because Princess Royal had left. If Princess Royal was still in Arendelle, it wouldn't matter even if there were no guards in the entire palace. But now that Princess Royal had left, the security of the palace needed guards to protect it. In fact, no one thought that Princess Royal would leave so suddenly. Even Princess Anna didn't think that her sister would disappear without a trace after giving her a few simple words. No one knew where she went. Maybe she was no longer in the current world, but somewhere they didn't know. My sister has been away for 3 days. Princess Anna looked at the harbor in the distance, turned to look at the captain behind her, and whispered, "I don't know where my sister went, and why she left in such a hurry this time." The captain behind her didn't answer, but whispered, "Her Majesty the Queen must have left for something important. Your Royal Highness doesn't have to worry too much. After all, there are very few people in this world who can threaten Her Majesty the Queen." Princess Anna nodded gently and said slowly, "I know. I just miss my sister a little. I used to think that the person I missed the most was him, but after my sister left, I realized that the person I cared about the most in my heart was still my sister. If she was there, I would feel very relaxed, as if I didn't care about anything. No matter what I did wrong, my sister would help me deal with it. But now that she's suddenly left, a lot of things are suffocating me. I'm worried that I'll do something wrong and mess up Arendelle." The captain glanced at her and said softly, "Princess Anna has been doing very well." Ta. Just as she finished speaking, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside, and then a panting voice said, "Not good. Your Royal Highness." The pirates in Iceland seemed to be making some strange movements. The fleets of the southern islands also seem to be up to no good. They seem to be colluding with each other and are approaching our waters. Patter. It sounded like something had fallen to the ground and broken. Then, there was a series of hurried footsteps. Soon, several fully armored generals entered the palace. About 15 minutes later, the palace wizards of Arendelle also gathered. The ice witches all came to the palace hall and seemed to be arguing about something. The guards outside would eavesdrop from time to time. Although he didn't understand a lot of things and didn't hear the complete story, he felt that a war was about to break out in Arendelle. It had been 20 years. Ever since Princess Royal was born, Arendelle had never been involved in a war. Now that Princess Royal had just left, the dark clouds of war were approaching. This caused people to feel a trace of unease. Soren stood on the deck and stared at the sea. After a while, he took out a gold coin from his pocket and played with it. This gold coin was about the same weight as an ordinary kindler, but the pattern on it was different. This was because the pattern on it was not the goddess of wealth, but the oldest goddess of luck. As for the mysterious runes on the back of the gold coin, Soren didn't recognize them at all. As a wizard, he was too unprofessional. A lot of things were half-baked, and he didn't have enough time to learn them. But Soren wasn't completely out of ideas. He actually had a simpler way to unlock the secret of this gold coin, but the cost was slightly higher. Pay 7,000 slaughter EXP. Soren actually knew from the beginning that this gold coin seemed to have some kind of sealing power, but he didn't want to give up so much slaughter EXP. But after thinking about it carefully, he decided to pay the slaughter EXP because this should be a legendary special item. When Soren first touched it, he felt an electric current. He didn't know if it had anything to do with the blessing of the goddess of misfortune on him. After all, the goddess of luck and the goddess of misfortune appeared from the corpse of the goddess of luck. A faint light appeared. The gold coin in Soren's palm seemed to have a layer of fog lifted, emitting a strange golden light, and then gradually calming down. Item type, Lucky Gold Coin, Number 3, Item Grade, Grade 3 Legendary Item, Item Description, this is a very special lucky gold coin. It is said that it was originally created by the goddess of luck. It carries the blessing of the goddess of luck and can bring good luck to the owner. There are a total of 12 of these gold coins. It is said that after collecting all 12 gold coins, an even more amazing secret can be found. But it seems that no one has collected all of these lucky gold coins so far. Only 1 or 2 lucky gold coins would appear occasionally, and in the end, they would be obtained by other epic heroes. It seems that these lucky gold coins have a special connection with the legendary Card of Fate. The legendary Great Arcanists seem to have researched the mysterious field of luck as well. Requirements: none. Special effect: Hero's Luck. When holding this gold coin, any owner will receive the ability, Hero's Luck. When triggering any test, whether it's attack, dodge, hit, immunity, negotiation, or any other field, the owner of the lucky gold coin will permanently receive 1 point of luck bonus. Note: legend has it that the goddess of luck and the goddess of misfortune are also looking for these gold coins. Give them to the priests of the 2 goddesses first, and you can receive their rewards. Lucky Gold Coin. This was the data that Soren identified after unsealing it. It seemed to be a legendary item that couldn't increase combat power too much, but it seemed to be quite useful. In the simplest way, this lucky gold coin could provide a special effect of luck +1. This kind of luck bonus could be used in any field, whether it was attack, dodge, immunity, etc. It could give an additional 1 point of luck bonus. It was possible that an enemy that couldn't be hit in battle would suddenly be hit because of a little bit of luck, and an attack that couldn't be avoided would suddenly be dodged by falling down. Who knew about this thing called luck? From a personal point of view, Soren felt that it should be very useful. But he didn't know if the effect of this lucky gold coin could be stacked because according to the description, there were a total of 12 lucky gold coins. If the effect of this lucky gold coin could be stacked, then after all of them were collected, there would be an additional 12 points of luck bonus. This was a rather frightening thing. It could be said that he was a born protagonist with good luck. When he went out and picked up money, he could do whatever he wanted and the enemy would coincidentally bump into him. It seemed that since ancient times, only the gods who were in charge of luck could increase someone's luck to such a degree, right? According to the past data conversion, 2 points of strength can provide 1 point of attack bonus, 2 points of agility can provide 1 point of evasion bonus, and 2 points of physique can provide 1 point of tenacity bonus. According to this calculation, all judgments can get 1 point of luck bonus, and the real effect of the conversion is quite amazing. Strength, agility, physique, perception, intelligence, charm. These 6 attributes all affected the judgment effect. If converted in this way, it was equivalent to getting 12 attribute points of judgment bonus as a reward. The effect was amazing when he thought about it carefully. Soren played with the lucky gold coin in his hand and put it away. It seemed that both the goddess of fortune and the goddess of misfortune wanted this thing. He didn't know what the hidden secret was. The next day, Soren came to Shipwreck Bay. There were not as many things here as in Port Tylon. He came mainly for the slave trade. There were too many indigenous slaves in the outer islands. These indigenous people were wild and untamed and did not know how to farm. If they wanted to develop and grow, the slaves on the mainland would be more useful because most of the slaves on the mainland knew how to do deep farming. In other words, fine farming. Recently, the situation on the mainland had become more and more chaotic. Many nobles took advantage of the situation and annexed the land, turning many civilians who originally owned land into the proletariat. Some of them were directly reduced to slaves. Now the slave market on the south coast was quite popular, and there were people selling themselves as slaves almost every day. In addition, the price of food seemed to have risen by nearly 50%. Many people smelled something wrong. They were either desperately buying food or stopping selling food and hoarding goods. This kind of basic food had risen by half, and the impact on the lower class of the poor was even greater. Especially now, when there was a shortage of manpower. Soren kept these changes in mind, but he didn't care about the food problem at all. He had long known that the closer it was to the period of turmoil, the higher the price of food would be, so he bought a lot of food supplies in advance. The buyers behind the scenes of the bulk food trade in Port Tylon were all Soren's men. At present, the food he had hoarded was enough to support him for a long time. After explaining the slave trade, Soren continued to go to the north along the sea route. However, what made him quite surprised and a little dumbfounded was that because he had brought a lot of gifts to Gloria in the north this time, and because of the assassination attempt by the legendary assassin, he was very careful not to show his flag this time. Then, he was robbed. The ones who wanted to rob them were the northern pirates, a group of fierce pirates without much organization. The most powerful pirates in the north were in Iceland. These pirates that Soren encountered were the kind that was small because the core of the northern sea trade route was in Arendelle. That was the real rich route. Chapter 297. Northerners. This was a very interesting regional race. Their physical characteristics were a bit like the Siberian race, with a relatively tall physique and quite exuberant hair. Most of the northern men were brave and warlike. Because of the cold climate, they needed strong alcohol to warm their blood for a long time. The way of thinking of the northerners was also slightly characteristic of a fighting nation. The women in the north had fair skin and delicate facial features. If the skin was more delicate, it was easy to become a beauty, similar to the women in the Crimea. Gloria was a typical northern beauty. And she was the most beautiful one. Therefore, in a place like the north, you would often see some ridiculous things. Even the pirates here were a little brainless. Many of them were famous for their stubbornness. They were a group of people who were not easy to deal with. For example, in the pirate army that besieged Soren on Snake Island, there was a pirate warship from the north. When the others saw that the situation was not good, they all surrendered. Only they fought hard and escaped with casualties. Because of this strange temperament, the northern pirates were almost the weakest group of pirates. The reason was very simple. They were not convinced by each other. There were almost no strong pirate forces on the entire north coast. They were all scattered into small groups of northern pirates. Because the trade on the north coast was mainly concentrated in the Arendelle area, and Arendelle had a very strong navy, it was often seen that northern pirates crossed the border to make a living in other waters. Although their overall strength was relatively weak, the individual strength of the northern pirates was generally higher than that of pirates in other places. The ones who robbed Soren were relatively ordinary northern pirates. However, they had a good dragon head warship. This was the habit of the Vrykul people in Iceland. They liked to install a dragon head on their warships, and this habit was inherited by the northern pirates to show their strength. The Vrykul people were the only pirate group capable of unifying the north coast. Unfortunately, they were quite xenophobic. Because of the belief of the war spirit totem, even the other races in the north were excluded by them. They were also the only pirate group who dared to attack Arendel's route. No one knew why the Princess Royal did not destroy them. The sound of ghosts wailing and wolves howling came from the front. As soon as Soren saw the northern pirates' warship, one of the captains immediately ran over to ask for his orders. He looked at the northern pirates' warship in the distance and said, "Bait them." This time, Soren had brought quite a number of elites with him. These were all veterans of naval battles. After hearing Soren's orders, they immediately understood his intentions. Then, they saw the captain below laughing strangely as he ordered the others to take action. They turned the ship around and made it look like they wanted to escape but were somewhat flustered. At the same time, they deliberately slowed down a little so that the pirates in front would feel that they could catch up. As expected, the enemy soon fell into the trap. A bare-chested pirate leader with a bearded face and a wolf head tattoo on his chest stood under the mast of the dragon-headed warship and shouted to his men beside him, "Don't fire. Get closer. Their speed is not as fast as ours. Prepare for boarding battle. This time, we have to take down the goods along with the ship." The spoils of war that pirates looted from merchant ships were of various grades. The most valuable items were not necessarily the goods on the ship. Sometimes, the value of the merchant ship itself was higher than the goods. Therefore, when the conditions allowed, pirates preferred to board ships to defeat their enemies. This way, not only would they not destroy the valuable goods on the ship, but they could also bring the ship back with them. Soren's pirate leader used this to attract the pirates, making them feel that they could catch up. This way, they would approach the ship and fight. They won the battle. Soren's ship was theirs. They lost the battle. Their ship naturally belonged to Soren. Waves of shouts and howls came closer and closer. The northern pirates in front of them were so excited that they cried like ghosts and howled like wolves. From time to time, some of them even roared like battle cries. Their faces were full of excitement because they realized that there were not many people on the ship. When both sides could see each other, the northern pirates immediately swung their ropes over. Bang! The hulls of the two ships collided slightly. About 20 northern pirates roared and rushed over. Behind them, about 30 pirates were preparing to board the ship. Clap! Clap! Soren, who had been sitting by the side and watching the show, clapped his hands. Then, a large group of fierce-looking pirates with scars all over their bodies rushed out of the cabin. The pirates' intuition was actually quite sharp. When the group of northern pirates swung their ropes over to Soren's ship, they immediately realized that the ship in front of them was not a merchant ship. This was because the sailors in front of them did not show any signs of fear. They did not even show any signs of nervousness. Among the many scarred sailors in front of them, there were actually some who were excitedly licking their knives. Their expressions were even more ferocious and cruel than the pirates, as if they were lambs that had sent themselves to their doorstep. Kiki. A burly pirate carrying a battle axe that weighed more than 100 pounds rushed over. He was the ship's field commander. He seemed to have a trace of some other bloodline. He was about 2 meters tall. Howling excitedly, he directly swung his battle axe and split one of the northern pirates in half. Then he roared, "Guys! Kill these idiots! You're looking for your own death. Raise the battle flag. Let these guys die a little more knowing." Suddenly, the pirates who rushed out of the cabin were extremely ferocious. With just a round of attacks, they directly knocked down the northern pirates who rushed over. Then, one of the nimble pirates went over to raise the battle flag, while the others rushed over to the opposite pirate ship. The battle was naturally not to repel the enemy's attack, but to take away their warship. A black flag was raised. There seemed to be a commotion on the opposite pirate ship. One of them seemed to recognize the flag and exclaimed, "It's the throat cutter. It's the flag of the Southern Pirate King." There was a commotion. The northern pirates in front of them seemed to be frightened. Then, when Soren's elite pirates rushed over, they were immediately thrown into chaos. The battle had been going on for so long. There was almost no need for Soren to do anything. The elite pirates that he brought back from the outer islands under his command only needed 2 rounds of attacks to defeat the northern pirates. Some of them even threw away their weapons and surrendered. However, this proportion was obviously much less than the southern pirates who surrendered in the battle. They were obviously weaker than Soren in terms of strength and numbers, but there were still some northern pirates who were desperately fighting. This might have something to do with their traditions. There were many traditions among the northern pirates that advocated death in battle. They believed that the souls of those who died in battle were more noble than those who died of old age or illness. And in the southern pirates' customs, they would not fight to the death if they could live. Swoosh. Soren did not join the boarding battle. His identity was now different, and sometimes there was no need to rush to the front line. However, he also needed to gain some slaughter EXP, so when the battle began, he took out the Elven War Bow +2 that Dark Blade gave him. Shooting with a war bow in a naval battle was actually quite fun. Soren specifically chose to shoot the wounded enemy pirates. With his strong basic attributes as support, the probability of hitting the enemy was quite high. Not to mention, he also had the lucky gold coin, which gave him a permanent +1 luck bonus. Soren killed the northern pirates in front of him one by one. Although his mastery of the bow was not very good, it would not be a problem if he accidentally killed his own men. After all, he could still gain slaughter EXP. Fortunately, this did not happen. Soren harvested 7 or 8 heads one after another, and then all the northern pirates who were desperately resisting were shot dead. The battle was over. The whole process took less than 10 minutes, and the northern pirates who wanted to rob Soren were robbed instead. Soren's fleet had one more warship. Take them down and interrogate them. Soren frowned as he looked at the bloodstains on the deck. He then put away the Elven War Bow and ordered, "See if you can get anything useful out of them. Then get someone to clean up the bodies and clean up all the bloodstains on the deck. This time, we are going to the North Coast City. Try not to cause any unnecessary trouble." "Yes, Your Excellency." A burly man with a battle axe that weighed more than 100 pounds bowed respectfully. Then, when he turned around and ordered the other pirates to clean up the bodies, his expression was quite fierce and arrogant. He looked a little arrogant. As the elite pirates under Soren, many of them had a strange temper. But no matter how strange their tempers were, these people were respectful in front of Soren. They would only become arrogant and domineering when facing others. There were pirates cleaning up the battlefield and collecting the spoils on the bodies. Some of them went to the opposite pirate ship. They might need to bring the ship back to Shipwreck Bay. Behind the deck was a group of captured enemies. Next to them were elite pirates who were watching over them. There was a ferocious-looking executioner who was interrogating them. From time to time, screams could be heard. After such a series of battles, the survival of the fittest among Soren's men had finally cultivated a group of elite troops that could be used in battle. About a few minutes later, the pirate in charge of interrogating ran over and whispered something in Soren's ear. Then, Soren stood up in surprise and frowned. "Dragon? Are you sure he's not lying?" Standing in front of Soren was a pirate with a rather ugly face. He patted his chest and promised, "Your Excellency. With my years of experience, they can't hide from me if they're lying. And there are others below who know a little bit about it. These guys came to the northwest for this matter." "Is that so?" Soren nodded slightly and showed a thoughtful expression. After a while, he looked up and glanced at the others and said in a deep voice, "Don't leak the news. Although it's just an adult white dragon, it looks like it's worth our time." Chapter 298. Slaying a Dragon. Thinking of this, Soren's expression could not help but become a little excited. For any adventurer, slaying a dragon was a very meaningful thing. Not only did it represent a dangerous challenge, but it also represented an amazing reward at the same time. Although Soren had encountered a lot of dragons during this period of time, they were basically all subspecies of dragons. This time, he had the opportunity to kill a pure-blood dragon, so he would not miss it no matter what. White Dragon. An adult white dragon. Although the white dragon was very weak among the pure-blooded dragon species, it was much stronger than other subdragon species. An adult white dragon also had the strength of a legendary level. Its frost dragon breath could freeze a person into ice in an instant. As a pure-blood dragon, the white dragon also had a natural dragon template. Their spoils of war were 3 times the standard, their vitality was stronger than most monsters, and at the same time, they also had extremely tough dragon skin and dangerous dragon claws and fangs. The basic health of an adult white dragon was more than 20 points. Under normal circumstances, their vitality was quite strong. Many people used to think that the white dragon was the weakest among the pure-blood dragons, so they looked down on it. However, when the time came, they realized that even though the white dragon was the weakest among the dragons, it was still much more dangerous than other creatures. The challenge rating of an adult white dragon was 16. If it had rare grade items and 1 or 2 legendary equipment, this challenge rating could be lowered to 12. It was difficult for ordinary weapons to break the white dragon's skin and scales, so at least a grade 1 rare grade weapon was needed to deal with it. There was a period of decline for the dragons. The specific reason was not known, but there was a period of time when the pure-blood dragons could not cast many spells. Sometimes, they could not even cast as many spells as the dragon disciple sorcerers. Therefore, during that period of time, the dragons were the easiest to kill. It was roughly around the time of the Silver Age and the Arcane Empire. During this period of time, the dragons' ability declined for some reason, and their general challenge rating was lowered by about 2 to 5 levels. Then, after the Arcane Empire, the dragons became a lot stronger. Originally, the adult white dragon could only cast wind, which basically relied on its claws and fangs to attack. But now, it could cast fog and ice wall. Wizards believed that this fluctuation in ability was related to the elemental tide, but the specifics were still unconfirmed. Note, adepts believe that the elementium in the world will move like the tides of the sea. This ebb and flow will affect the elementium energy structure of the world. Therefore, a species like the dragon race that relied solely on their innate abilities would easily be affected by the elemental tide and experience changes in their overall abilities. However, the time span of this change is over thousands of years. Soren wasn't too sure about the growth conditions of the dragon clan. However, based on his past experience, he knew that dragons that lived in special environments would have 1 or 2 more spells than other dragons of the same species. The information that his subordinates had interrogated was actually not very complete. Because even these pirates had only heard that an adult white dragon had flown over here, and that the white dragon seemed to be slightly injured, swaying a little when it flew. After receiving the news, they sent people to the north to inquire about the situation. Yesterday morning, they just learned that a white dragon had attacked humans near the Deepwater port. This white dragon that suddenly appeared near the human town caused a lot of panic. In the end, the Chamber of Commerce was forced to pool money and hire adventurers to deal with it. At that time, it attracted a lot of adventurers from the north. However, in the end, it seemed that they didn't succeed in killing the white dragon. They only injured it a little, and more than half of the adventurers who dealt with it died. After the white dragon encountered the adventurers, it flew to the sea, and then it happened to be seen by some people. The news also spread to some people. These pirates went in the direction of the white dragon to try their luck and see if they could find its resting place. However, they didn't expect that they would unfortunately meet Soren. According to Soren's judgment, the white dragon's nest might be on an island in the middle of the sea, because dragons would not build their nests near human settlements. It must be for some reason that it appeared in a place called the Deepwater port. However, it seemed that after being injured, the white dragon wisely chose to leave and wanted to fly back to its nest to recuperate. There were many dragon subspecies in the north. However, there weren't many pure-blooded dragons. The number of white dragons was also relatively small. They were mainly distributed in the depths of the glacial mountains and the cold islands in the sea. If its nest was near the deep-water port, it would be difficult for the dragon to abandon its nest and run away according to the dragon's habits. If its nest was in the glacial mountains, then the dragon wouldn't fly to the sea. Therefore, Soren thought that the possibility of its nest being on an island in the north coast was as high as 80%. But the problem now was, there were so many islands in the sea, where would its nest be? Tap tap tap. Soren gently tapped his fingers. After listening to the story, he slowly said, "We only know the direction it flew to, but we don't have the exact location. I'm afraid it's difficult to find its nest in the vast sea. How can this kind of thing take so much effort? No. They must know where the white dragon's nest is. At least they know the approximate location." Soren frowned and stood up. He said in a deep voice, "What about the leader of the northern pirates? Bring their leader here." As Soren's voice fell, the pirates around him couldn't help but look at each other. After a while, seeing Soren's frown getting deeper and deeper, one of them finally mustered up the courage to say, "Your Excellency. Their leader has been shot dead by Your Excellency." Dead? Soren was stunned for a moment, then he rubbed his forehead in annoyance. He didn't have any recollection of it at all. The leader of the northern pirates was too insignificant. Even if someone mentioned him now, Soren couldn't remember when he killed him. He was one of the targets that Soren killed. Torture them. Soren frowned and thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "Torture them one by one. I don't believe that they would come here to try their luck just because they saw a dragon fly by without knowing where its nest is." Time couldn't drag on for too long. The dragon race had a strong regenerative ability. If they dragged on for too long and found the white dragon, they would have to face an unharmed giant dragon. The pirates in front of him did not seem to be very strong. They dared to slay the dragon because the white dragon was injured. Therefore, they must be confident that they could find the dragon in a short time and kill it before it recovered from its injuries. Chapter 299. Screams could be heard coming from the cabin. About half an hour later, one of his men came up with a bloody nautical chart and bowed respectfully in front of Soren. "Your Excellency. Everything is out. The dragon might have gone here." The man in front of Soren spread out the nautical chart. It was a map of the south coast, found from the corpse of the northern pirate leader. He pointed at an island in the northwest and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency. It's here, I think it's called Shark Reef. They think that the dragon's lair might be nearby." Hearing this, Soren reached out and took the nautical chart. After looking at it with a frown, he asked, "How is the route? How long will it take?" The man beside him quickly ran down to ask, then came back and said, "Your Excellency. There aren't any dangerous areas on this route, but there are a lot of hidden reefs here, so we need to be careful. In terms of time, with our ship, it will take at most 1 day. We should be able to reach this place by tomorrow morning." Shark Reef. Soren tapped his finger on the table, thought for a moment, then opened his eyes and said, "Tell old Sea Eagle to come here." A minute later, a well-built middle-aged man appeared in front of Soren. Unlike the other pirates under Soren's command, old Sea Eagle seemed to have the demeanor of a noble. It was a very special temperament, and it was different from the other pirate leaders under Soren's command. This middle-aged man was indeed a small noble, a lord of the south coast. Unfortunately, he lost his title and wealth for some reason. In the end, he became a pirate and became a somewhat famous pirate. He was a small pirate leader under Soren's command. There were many people like him under Soren's command. After all, most of the pirates in the south coast had to listen to his command. "Give this letter to the master of the wizard tower." Soren raised his head and looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. He took out a quill and quickly wrote a letter. Then he sealed it with wax and handed it to the middle-aged man. He ordered, "Send the gifts on the ship over later. I've already arranged the location and route for you. You can take the test at the estuary and head to Ice River City. After you deliver the gifts, you just have to wait there. If the master of the Sorcerer Tower has anything she wants to ask you, just answer her." There were valuable gifts on this ship. Soren did not plan to use this ship to challenge the White Dragon. After all, it was an adult giant dragon. Giant dragons could easily overturn a ship if they went all out. Therefore, he decided to divide his troops into 2 groups. He would let his trusted subordinates deliver the gift to Gloria's Wizard Tower, and then he would take part of the elite troops to search for the White Dragon. A pure-blooded adult dragon species should not be given up so easily, not to mention that it was injured. Soren planned to use the Northern Pirates' ship to find it. Even if it was damaged, he would not feel bad. The middle-aged man in front of him nodded gently, then he put away the letter and respectfully said, "Don't worry. The gifts will be delivered in perfect condition." "Good." Soren looked at him with satisfaction and reminded him, "Don't trespass the Wizard Tower. Just send the message as I said. She should meet you after she knows the news." "Okay. You can go now." Soren had always been a strict person. After he decided to divide his troops, he immediately ordered his subordinates to set sail for the Northern Wizard Tower. He himself went to the dragon-headed warship that captured the pirates. It was not necessarily useful to deal with a giant dragon because many people could only stare blankly when the dragon flew into the sky. Therefore, he only brought the elite pirates with him. There were only about 20 of them. As for the captured pirates, they were still kept on the ship. If they could be recruited, they would be recruited. If not, they would be sent to do manual labor. Otherwise, Soren would have already harvested their heads. Soren actually had a lot of men under his command, but compared to the other 2 pirate kings, they were still a little lacking. If he wanted to fight the pirate king Ashrod in the future, he was afraid that he would lack stronger elite pirates. These northern pirates were basically grade 2 and above. With a little training and more experience, they would be able to become grade 3 pirates. These were the backbone of the pirates. The 2 warships soon separated. Soren's original ship continued to sail to deliver the gift to the Northern Tower, and at the same time, it brought a letter from him. As for the dragon-headed warship from the Northern Pirates, it went to a place called Shark Reef. That was the place where the White Dragon most likely built its nest. If it was found, Soren would kill it. If not, Soren would give up and go to the north. A day passed very quickly. Because the captives who knew the route were also on the ship, Soren easily passed through the reef. Then, on the morning of the 2nd day, an island appeared in front of him. It looked a little like the distribution of the Spratly Islands. In the vast sea, there were dozens of large and small islands. The area was basically not very big, and the smallest was only a few dozen meters wide. However, at a glance, he could see that there was a larger island with a diameter of more than 30 kilometers. The whole island was independent like a cliff, and there was a dense forest on it. Because it was close to the northwest, the terrain of the island was a little strange. If he really wanted to say what it was a bit like the Ice and Fire Island in the Heaven, Sword and Dragon Saber. On the north side of the island, there was obviously ice and snow, and on the south side of the island, there was a volcano. However, it seemed that the volcano had not erupted for a long time. He just did not know if it was an extinct volcano or an active one. This kind of terrain was very attractive to dragons. Many kinds of dragons like to build their nests in such an environment, so the possibility of the white dragon flying here was very high. Dock. Soren picked up the monocular and looked at the island in front of him, then ordered, "Dock at this better place. Let's go to the island and take a look." About an hour later, the Dragonhead warship docked at one side of the island. Soren brought some of his elite subordinates to the beach, and left 3 to 5 people on the ship to guard it. As soon as he arrived on the island, Soren felt that the situation here was a little strange. The reason was simple. There were very few animals here, and the whole island was very quiet. There were not many birds in the dense forest. Under normal circumstances, there should be many animals living here, and birds also like to build their nests here. However, it seemed that there was nothing here, which could only mean one thing, and that was that there was a terrifying creature nearby. The most likely was a dragon. Draconic aura was a kind of ability that could cover a large area. Even the weaker white dragon, as a pure-blooded dragon species, had draconic aura. Any creature that came close to it would have to undergo a will immunity test, or else it would be enveloped by fear. Draconic aura would expel other creatures near the dragon's nest, and other creatures would not dare to come close unless they were enslaved by the dragon. It seemed that there were no seabirds here, and it was probably because the dragon would fly by from time to time. Gulu. Some strange sounds attracted Soren's attention. Just as he raised his hand to signal the others to be careful, a sharp sword suddenly shot out from the forest and directly hit one of his subordinates. Then, he saw the bushes in front of him shake, and dozens of short humanoid creatures with messy hair and oil paint rushed out. They held simple weapons in their hands, but their movements were fast and fierce. These humanoid creatures had the same outline as humans, but they were very thin and small like monkeys. They were about 1:2 to 1:4 meters tall, and their movements were very fast. Their eyes were wild and fierce, and they roared as they rushed over, as if they wanted to kill all of them. "It's the barbarians!" A pirate captain shouted and said in a deep voice, "Everyone be careful. These barbarians are very agile. Be careful of their weapons, they might be poisoned." Shang. A sword appeared in Soren's palm, but then something unexpected happened. His own sword did not hit the barbarian in front of him. The barbarian's short body was able to dodge in mid-air, and when its body was in the air, there was basically no point for it to dodge Soren's attack. But that was all it could do. After Soren's attack missed, a cold light appeared in his other hand, and then the barbarian in front of him was cut in half. Sword form, waist cut. Soren put away his sword to defend, and held a curved sword in each hand to block the attack of another short barbarian. Then he jumped back 3 steps and rushed forward to perform, sword form, spinning strike. Pucci. Streams of blood splattered into the air. A series of data appeared in front of Soren's eyes, target killed. You successfully activated, sword form, waist cut. You dealt 76 damage to the target, heavy hit. Target killed. Extracting soul energy. You've gained 1800 slaughter EXP. Target killed. You successfully activated, spinning strike. You dealt 56 damage to the target, heavy hit. Target killed. Extracting soul energy. You've gained 1560 slaughter EXP. A series of slaughter EXP notifications appeared. Soren was very surprised to find that the barbarians in front of him were probably grade 2 or above, but most of their dexterity was above 20 points. At the same time, the slaughter EXP they gave seemed to be about 50% higher than the enemies of the same grade that Soren had dealt with before. The barbarians in front of him basically had around 1500 slaughter EXP. Chapter 300. A series of screams were heard. Although a large number of the savages in front of them were killed, the pirates that Soren brought over also suffered a lot of losses. Because these savages used simple weapons, in order to pursue lethality, they smeared poison on their weapons. This kind of poisoned weapon was more troublesome as long as it hurt people. Fortunately, these pirates were all elite troops, and most of them had a decent physique. Otherwise, they would have died in the first round of the poison test. As long as they survived the test of death, even if they were poisoned, it would not be completely fatal. Because the physique of the professions in this world was generally stronger. Be careful. From time to time, there would be a cry of alarm. The savages in front of them could use blow darts, but they were not metal arrows, but wooden ones that were as sharp as toothpicks. This kind of blow darts did not have an anesthetic effect, but they were quite poisonous. Several of the elite pirates brought by Soren fell to the ground, but fortunately, the others were experienced in fighting and quickly blocked the attack of the savages. These savages did not have any armor, and they were wearing simple animal skins. As long as they did not dodge the attack, they would be killed in one blow. A cold light of the sword appeared. Soren saw that 3 to 5 of his men had died, and the murderous intent in his heart became stronger and stronger. He used the curved sword with both hands to activate the last haste on a rare great item, and then his whole body turned into a shadow and rushed into the savages. With the effect of haste, it was much easier to deal with these savages. Soren's 2 swords danced wildly and turned into a sky full of light. Blood splashed in front of his eyes, and heads fell to the ground. In just a few minutes, more than 10 savages were beheaded. Gulagalahi. Strange sounds were heard. Seeing that they were no match for these people in front of them, the savages actually ran away directly. More than 20 savages that rushed in at the beginning died, and the remaining 10 or so relied on their agile hands to escape back into the forest. These savages' climbing ability was very strong. After getting into the forest, only the leaves and shrubs could be seen shaking, and then they disappeared in a moment. Soren did not let his pirates chase after them. Instead, he looked at the other wounded and ordered, "Take the wounded to the ship, the rest of you follow me to go around here." The savages were widely distributed. On the islands within the range of the sea, the figures of the indigenous people could often be seen. Soren touched the bodies of the savages in front of him and found some strange signs. Then, he found a sculpture carved out of wood on one of the savages who looked like the leader. This sculpture was a bit like a totem, but it was not the beast that Soren was familiar with, but it looked like a hovering dragon. That's right. The more he looked at it, the more it looked like a dragon. Soren's face when he saw it, and he was a little bit excited. "Be careful. There should be a dragon here." Here. Of the savages were of the savages. Of the savages of course, they were not enslaved by humans. Instead, they were enslaved by some powerful and terrifying creatures, such as the giant dragon that set its nest here. Of soft them. Of soft of them. Of the of soft them. Dragons actually had strong enslavement abilities. They could enslave most of the monsters, including subspecies of dragons and those of their own kind that were weaker than them. Therefore, you should never think that you only need to face a dragon when you want to slay a dragon. In the past, many people thought that they could slay a dragon just by reading a little guide. They took for granted that dragons were the kind of creatures that would fight on the ground. As a result, when they really encountered a dragon, they were all dumbfounded. Warriors could not fly to the sky to attack, wizard spell damage was not enough, and archers could not break the dragon's scales. When the dragon swooped down and gave them a chance to attack, it often meant a fatal attack. If a falcon's dive could tear through leather armor, then how much damage could a dragon's dive do? Soren remembered this very early on. As a melee profession, he must try his best to prevent the dragon from flying to the sky to fight. Because at that time, it had the initiative. And because it could escape at any time. After all, this world still had its own rules. Even the legendary sword saint's explosive power on the ground was so terrifying that it may be able to kill a pure-blooded dragon in 1 or 2 rounds. However, he still couldn't use do chi or anything like that to fly. Most melee professions were at a disadvantage in the air, unless they increased their strength to the level of a saint. "Bring the things here." Soren jumped onto a cliff, looked at the surrounding environment, and then looked at the north side of the island covered with ice and snow. Then he jumped down from above and ordered his men, "Bring all the things I prepared at the beginning." Yes. Soon, his men returned to the ship. About 10 minutes later, someone ran over with a bundle of javelins. These javelins looked a bit like spears, and some of them were connected to chains. There were also heavy javelins made of steel. They looked like short javelins made of pure steel, but they were used as throwing weapons. "Take 2 each." Soren looked at the pirates behind him and ordered in a deep voice, "Leave the rest to me. When the opportunity arises, attack its wings." Dragons were very powerful. Even a white dragon was quite dangerous. The dragon scales and dragon skin on its body had very strong defensive capabilities. Even if you broke the dragon scales, you would still have to face a layer of tough dragon skin. So from ancient times to the present, in the anecdotes of bards, it seemed that the most important thing was to find a weapon that could break the dragon's defense. But in fact, only those who had really slain dragons knew that the most important thing to do was to destroy their ability to fly. There was a saying, to shoot a man, shoot the horse, to catch bandits, capture the king. The dragon's wings were the only place on the dragon's body that was not covered by dragon scales. It was also the place with the largest area of defense and the weakest defense. Although this place was not fatal to the dragon at all. But the strategic significance of attacking this place was quite huge. It was equivalent to destroying half of the dragon's flexibility, and also making it unable to use dragon wing flaps, dive attacks, dragon wing sweeps, and so on. The protagonist in the anecdotes of bards could stupidly attack the dragon's fatal point, and then after a back-and-forth struggle, suddenly seize the opportunity to kill the dragon with more than half of its HP left. But if you played like this, you would definitely die miserably in the end. Heavy weapons were needed to deal with the dragon. The javelins that Soren brought over were quite important props. Chapter 301. There were many exotic flowers and herbs on this island. Unfortunately, Soren didn't know much about the herbology branch of alchemy, so he couldn't identify the medicinal properties of these plants. He took his men around the island from the side, and he could feel that the closer they got to the north of the island, the lower the temperature was. This was a very rare phenomenon, probably due to the geothermal heat emitted by the volcano in the south of the island. The north of the island was covered with ice and snow, but it was mainly concentrated in one area. Soren judged that it was most likely the white dragon's nest. Because there was a dragon living here, it was almost impossible to see any other beasts. Soren and his men walked for about half an hour before they finally got close to the snow-covered mountain. The surrounding cliffs were very smooth and steep, and they were also covered with a layer of ice. It didn't look like a natural situation, but more like a deliberate arrangement by some creatures. Dragons like to make their nests as steep as 90-degree mountain walls, so that other creatures that could not fly would not be able to get close to them. As for the white dragons, whose abilities were slightly weaker than the other giant dragons, they also liked to use their dragon breath to cover the vicinity of their lairs with ice. This kind of ice would make it very difficult to climb around the cliffs, and any enemy that dared to challenge it near its nest would be negatively affected by the ice walk status. They would have to do a reflex appraisal related to agility when moving, or they might slip and make mistakes in their attacks. However, white dragons didn't have such a problem because they were born with a special ability called ice walk. The ice Quetzalcoatlus that Soren fought in the past had part of the white dragon's bloodline, so they also liked to cover their nests with ice. Details in Volume 1, Hide. Soren gestured to the other men behind him and said in a deep voice, "You guys stay nearby. I will find a way to lure the white dragon out of its nest, and then you guys find a chance to attack its wings with heavy javelins." Heavy weapons had a natural armor penetration ability. It could be simply understood that heavy weapons were much better than ordinary swords to deal with a knight's plate armor. These heavy javelins had a hidden armor penetration ability. It might be a little difficult to throw them out to break the dragon's scales, but it was quite easy to break the dragon's wings. There were obvious barbs on the javelins, which looked similar to the barbs on a spear. Some of the javelins were even connected to a chain, while the other end was a heavy steel javelin. What kind of weapon, if used properly, could lock a dragon's wings and make it completely lose its ability to fly? Unless the dragon forcibly tore off the javelin along with the flesh of the dragon's wings. Shadow hide. Soren's figure slowly disappeared into the shadows. He scanned his surroundings and approached the mountain wall on his right. Because it was covered with a layer of ice, the entire mountain wall was very smooth. If it was anyone else, it would be impossible to climb up. However, for Soren, who had 25 points of agility, this wasn't a problem at all. A pair of daggers appeared in his hands, and he quietly climbed up the mountain. Soon, he reached an open platform on the mountain wall. This was a very big platform. The diameter was probably more than 50 meters. It was difficult for nature to create such a neat platform. Soren just glanced at it and knew that it was prepared for him by the dragon. Dragons flew like eagles. They liked to swoop down from high places and soar into the sky with a flap of their wings. Therefore, many of them would prepare such a platform for themselves. Even the dragons that occupied ancient castles liked to swoop down from the highest point of the castle when they flew. This was a habit. After walking along the platform for a little distance to the left, Soren felt that something was wrong. It was an indescribable feeling. It was as if his whole body was involuntarily breathing heavily, his heart was beating faster, as if he was frightened. His back was covered with goosebumps, and there was an inexplicable sense of powerlessness and exhaustion. It felt like he had a bad cold, and his whole body was weak. This was draconic aura. Almost at the same time as this feeling appeared, a row of data appeared, affected by draconic aura. Triggered test of will. Test of will passed. You have successfully avoided the negative effect of draconic aura. You have successfully avoided the fear effect of draconic aura. The feeling of powerlessness gradually subsided. It didn't last long, and Soren gradually returned to normal. One of the most troublesome things to deal with when slaying a dragon was the draconic aura of a pure-blooded dragon. This was a permanent ability that didn't need to be activated. It was also a natural ability that dragons had. They could exert their draconic aura on any creature that came within a certain range of them. This kind of draconic aura ignored both friend and foe. Although it couldn't directly kill the enemy, it could create a deterrent effect. It could be said that it was quite useful to deal with creatures that were weaker and didn't have strong wills. Most of the dragons used draconic aura to open up a path for their slaves, and it was easy to subdue some monsters. Ordinary people couldn't withstand draconic aura. Therefore, using human wave tactics to deal with dragons wasn't necessarily useful. This was because the sight of a dragon would frighten many ordinary soldiers, and they wouldn't be able to fight in the end. The specific effect could be imagined as a Tyrannosaurus rex or a group of wild elephants rushing towards you, and then you would have a long sword and a shield in your hands. In this situation, if you had the courage to stand still and fight, then your will would definitely pass. If you couldn't do this, you might fail to resist draconic aura. Will assessment 16+. Soren was a person who valued the will attribute very much, so it wasn't surprising that he was immune to the negative effects of draconic aura. However, whether the pirates he brought along could successfully resist the negative effects of draconic aura would depend on whether their will was strong enough. However, people who sailed on the sea all year round, withstood the storms and waves, and often faced the dangers of killing and fighting sea monsters would definitely have a stronger will than others. Will was really important. Ever since Soren went to the abyss of hell, he deeply understood this point. From the side to the entrance of the dragon's cave, Soren quickly found his target. It was a huge adult white dragon. The depth of the dragon's cave wasn't very high. In fact, adult dragons were more impatient. They sometimes appeared a little careless, just like young people who had just reached adulthood who were easily impulsive. Only when they entered their old age would they begin to become cunning. At that time, they began to avoid direct combat and liked to use traps to deal with intruders. Their dragon's cave would gradually become a huge maze over a long period of time, and then the treasures would begin to be hidden deeper and deeper. Some dangerous monster guards would also begin to appear in the maze, such as the most common Tauren and so on. As for ancient dragons, just think of the ancient red dragon in Whiterun City. Until now, other people thought that it was just an adult red dragon that appeared there. It was estimated that it would take a while for others to discover that there was an ancient red dragon hidden there. Then, it would cause a huge uproar in the southern plains and cause a lot of panic. At that time, it would be a big scene, but Soren didn't know if the development of the situation would be the same as what he knew in the past. If there were conditions, he would still try his luck in the future because there was a divine artifact in this ancient red dragon's cave. White Dragon. The weakest of the chromatic dragons, a creature of the chaotic evil alignment. The dragon's cave in front of him was similar to the one in Soren's memory. White dragons like to dig their dragon's nest down. Although the dragon's nest was on a higher mountain, the cave's entrance was sunken downwards, and the surroundings were frozen because of its ice dragon breath. It looked like a huge ice cellar. White dragons were not picky when it came to food. Like other dragons, they could eat almost anything. The digestive ability of dragons was as brittle as steel. However, white dragons preferred to freeze their prey with their dragon breath before eating it. Many white dragons lived in overseas areas and would dive into the sea to hunt for fish. There was one more important thing. White dragons were the dragons that liked to attack from high places the most, and they would always use their dragon breath for their first attack. This was because white dragons could use their dragon breath more than other dragons. When a white dragon was in its infant stage, its scales would reflect light like a mirror. As it grew older, the luster would gradually disappear. When it reached adulthood, the characteristics of a white dragon would become grayish-white. This was an important basis to judge the strength of a white dragon. Soren only glanced into the dragon's cave and roughly judged that this was a white dragon that was in its late adult stage. It was close to its prime. Most of the dragons could be judged based on age. Their strength could be calculated based on their age. Their growth stages were baby dragon stage, challenge rating 1, infant dragon stage, challenge rating 4, juvenile dragon stage, challenge rating 7, adolescent dragon stage, challenge rating 10, adult dragon stage, challenge rating 13, adult dragon stage, challenge rating 16, old dragon stage, challenge rating 19, and old dragon stage, challenge rating 21. Basically, a white dragon would reach this stage. Further up were the ancient dragons. These dragons basically had divinity. It could be said that the difficulty of fighting them was not much different from challenging the saints. Therefore, killing ancient dragons required a lot of luck. The white dragon in front of him was transitioning from its adult stage to its prime stage. This was not good news. This was because pure-blooded dragons, even the weakest white dragon among the Pentashade dragons, would have an additional physical resistance and magic resistance when they transition from their adult stage to their prime stage. They would be immune to any physical damage and magic damage below 10 points. This natural talent would gradually increase over time, and in the end, it could evolve into immunity to certain types of damage. Fortunately, when these dragons were killed, their dragon scales and dragon skin would inherit part of the defensive resistance, which could be directly made into first-rate rare-grade equipment. This was a little troublesome. Soren quietly watched the adult white dragon, which was about 50 feet long, in his sight, and carefully moved towards it. Chapter 302. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Soren's footsteps were getting lighter and lighter, and his speed was getting slower and slower. Dragons had excellent hearing abilities. Even with Soren's high dexterity, it was still possible for the dragon to detect him sneaking in. Fortunately, it was a white dragon in front of him. It didn't have a high level of magic, and only had some spell-like abilities. Otherwise, Soren would have to be careful of magic traps when sneaking in. Once a dragon's nest had evolved into a maze over time, there would definitely be a lot of traps. The adult dragon in front of him seemed to be sleeping, but that didn't mean it couldn't sense the outside world. Sleeping was a very important process in a dragon's life. They still retained about 50% of their basic abilities while sleeping, and could sense other creatures approaching or slightly heavier footsteps. While sleeping, the dragon's abilities would gradually increase, and at the same time, its injuries would recover at a faster rate. This required it to eat a lot of prey in advance. Soren saw that the adult white dragon was recovering from its injuries. He noticed that there was a wound on the left wing of the white dragon. The wound was about 30 centimeters long and 5 centimeters deep. It seemed to be caused by a two-handed heavy sword. This would affect the white dragon's ability to fly. Then there was another wound on the white dragon's throat. There were small, dense scales there. The seemingly weak defense was actually the toughest part of the dragon's body. It was difficult for ordinary weapons to break through. The one who attacked it must have used a long sword or a rapier. The wound was small, but it was very deep. It seemed that the person who attacked it had a dragon-slaying weapon. When dealing with any pure-blooded dragon, you could imagine that most of its body was covered in full-body armor. In the anecdotes of bards, there was always a place on the dragon's body called the reverse scale. This was the dragon's fatal point. As long as you hit the reverse scale, you could kill the dragon even if it didn't hurt its heart. But in reality, dragons didn't have reverse scales. They had weak spots on their body, but they definitely didn't have a fatal reverse scale. No one knew when it started, but there was this saying in the bard stories. Many people believed it to be true, and many naive adventurers thought that they could easily slay a dragon if they found the reverse scale. After all, the stories always said that the hero hit the dragon's fatal point and killed it instantly. Its defense must be at least 25. Soren closed the distance to about 20 meters and observed the body of the adult white dragon in front of him, mainly the color, thickness, and distribution of the scales. Based on his rich experience, Soren could tell that the adult giant dragon in front of him had a defense level of around 25 points. In other words, the dragon scales and dragon skin that covered the surface of its body could resist close to 25 points of physical damage. This defensive strength was equivalent to an adult man holding a weapon with both hands and attacking with all his strength. In other words, an adult man wielding a two-handed weapon and attacking with all his might only be able to break through the dragon's defense. It was just enough to break through his defense, and the damage was probably less than 3 points. Soren had a serious expression on his face as he sneaked closer to the other side. At the same time, he thought to himself, with the elite pirates that I brought with me, it shouldn't be a problem to break through its dragon scale defense. But if it doesn't deal any heavy damage, it's estimated that the damage will be in the single digits. This was not a good thing. It was not easy to kill an adult giant dragon with just Soren's damage output alone. Following the side of the dragon's nest, Soren could see a pile of treasures. Because there were not many of them, they were directly covered by the huge body of the giant dragon. As the weakest white dragon among the chromatic dragons, although it had accumulated wealth to adulthood and had double to triple the loot standard, the treasures it had were not as exaggerated as the red dragons. Because the red dragon was the most powerful chromatic dragon, and it was also an evil giant dragon that liked to collect loot. However, in front of Soren's eyes, there were some small things that were sparkling and refracting light. Those were diamonds. The white dragon was one of the giant dragons that liked diamonds the most. As long as they found a diamond, they would always find a way to take it for themselves, unless this behavior was very dangerous. Among all the gems, the white dragon liked diamonds the most. Therefore, in almost any adult white dragon's nest, there were some eye-catching diamonds that could be found. Therefore, in the treasure that the white dragon did not seem to be rich, it was often possible to hide a valuable loot. The key was the number of diamonds. After all, this thing could be sold for a very high price as long as one piece. There was not much gold in the dragon's nest. Because it was close to the sea, Soren could hardly see much kindler. Most of it was fine gold sand and gold nuggets. There were not many gems, but there were a lot of diamonds mixed in. Soren saw nearly a dozen pieces. There was a moment of pause. Soren squatted in the corner and memorized the environment of the entire dragon's nest. At the same time, his brain began to make tactical arrangements. He had two plans. The first was to take advantage of the fact that the giant dragon had not discovered him and quickly pull out the legendary curved sword icing death to attack. As long as the distance was within 10 meters, even if the dragon's perception found him, Soren could still fight for 2 or 3 opportunities to attack. If he was lucky enough to hit the leader's vital point, Soren could cause a lot of damage to the enemy at the beginning of the battle. But in this case, the next battle would not be easy. Because the space in the dragon's nest was too narrow, the white dragon would definitely spit out dragon's breath when it reacted. At that time, Soren would have nowhere to hide. Never take the dragon's breath head-on. This was a special point in the rules of dragon slaying. The second plan was to lure the white dragon out so that there would be no chance for a sneak attack. But it could also make the white dragon think that he was a thief who sneaked into the dragon's nest. Under normal circumstances, the white dragon would definitely chase him out of the nest. In this way, Soren could lead it down and give the ambushing elite pirates a chance to attack. If he could keep the white dragon on the ground, the final victory would be as high as 80%. Soon. Soren made a plan in his mind. His figure suddenly flew out and rushed directly to the white dragon in front of him. Then he reached out and grabbed the treasure under it, grabbing a lot of gold and diamonds in one breath. After getting the treasure, Soren immediately retreated. Almost when he was about 5 meters away from the treasure, the sleeping giant dragon also moved slightly as if it sensed something, and then suddenly opened its huge dragon eyes. Dragon sense, 10 meters. Soren's figure had almost escaped to the outside of the dragon's nest, and only a blurry background could be seen. Roar. An angry roar sounded. The adult white dragon in front of him suddenly opened its eyes and stood up. It actually opened its mouth and said angrily in the common language, "Despicable thief." It was not an ordinary white dragon. It was not those beast-like white dragons without much wisdom. Being able to use the common language meant that there was something different about it. Chapter 303. It's been a month and a half. It seems that since he quit smoking, Futu has been catching colds easily. He slept all day and only woke up once today. Futu is still a little dizzy. Rumble. Heavy footsteps came from the dragon's nest. Soren didn't need to look back to know that the white dragon had woken up and was catching up from behind. Dragons had a close-range perception ability. Any creature that got close to them could be directly detected by them. Even the best halflings in the Shire could not avoid this because it was a supernatural sixth sense. The white dragon's nest was not big, which led to it rushing out quite quickly. Almost as soon as Soren's front foot ran out, the huge body of the white dragon rushed out behind him. Ice dragon breath. A cold dragon breath came out from behind Soren. Under this piercing dragon breath, the ground was frozen into ice at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon a new layer of ice appeared in place. The white dragon's ice dragon breath was the weakest among the pure-blooded dragon species. Its lethality was only half of the red dragon breath, but it was the most used dragon breath attack. The dragon breath of an adult white dragon could freeze a man into an ice sculpture, and then with a wave of its dragon claws, the man would shatter like broken ice. The scene was quite tragic. Soren dove out of the attack range of the ice dragon breath, but there was still a little cold air on his clothes, and soon a piece of frost could be seen on his clothes. The ice dragon breath of an adult white dragon could cause about 40 points of ice damage. It was an all-shaped attack that covered a large area. This kind of ice damage was still within Soren's tolerance range. If it was the dragon breath of an adult red dragon, he was afraid that he would lose half his life just by touching it. Whoosh! There was a harsh sound of friction. After Soren rushed out of the dragon's nest, he directly jumped from a height of nearly 100 meters. However, he didn't jump down directly. No matter how high his physique was, he would still fall to his death. He relied on his weapon to reduce the force of the fall and then slid down directly, just like when he fought against the hunters on the cliff in the past. The speed of the descent was quite fast, and it bought some time for Soren. So when he was about to reach the ground, the white dragon's huge body appeared at the edge of the cliff. It glanced at Soren, who had slid to the ground, and pounced on him without hesitation. Shameless thief. The white dragon in front of him seemed to have had some special experiences, because under normal circumstances, white dragons would only have relatively high intelligence when they reached old age. At the same time, they would also be able to speak languages other than Draconic. They were the closest to wild beasts among the pure-blooded dragon species. To a large extent, their challenge rating was lowered because of this. Wang. The white dragon flapped its wings and stabilized its body just as it was about to reach the ground. This dive had shortened the distance between them by quite a bit. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a dragon's breath that enveloped Soren's body. Dragons didn't have high dexterity. Most of them only had around 10 points. And because of their relatively large size, they couldn't dodge many of the enemy's attacks. However, this didn't mean that they were slow because most of the creatures with large bodies had lower dexterity. In fact, the speed of a giant dragon was comparable to that of a human with haste buff, so Soren was still within the range of its dragon's breath attack. Do it! Soren suddenly shouted and then jumped up. He reached out and grabbed a tree trunk above him, and with a 360-degree turn, he barely dodged the frost dragon's breath attack. But even so, his right hand still touched a little bit of the dragon's breath attack. In the blink of an eye, it was covered with frost, and his whole arm felt a little numb. Elemental damage. Soren's legendary curved sword, Icing Death, only had an additional 3 points of cold damage, but the frost dragon's breath attack directly dealt 30 points of elemental damage per second. This was an elemental attack that could freeze blood. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. A group of fierce pirates rushed from both sides. Their eyes were filled with fear and excitement. As soon as they came out, they immediately threw the heavy javelins in their hands. The javelins flew through the air and hit the white dragon's body. Some of them hit its dragon scales, but they barely broke through the defense of the dragon scales. It was like a hammer hitting an iron felt. Most of the javelins were bounced back, but the dragon scales also showed signs of damage, and traces of dragon blood seeped out. However, the javelins that hit the dragon's wings didn't bounce back. They directly penetrated the dragon's wings. Because of the barbs on them, they directly hung on the dragon's wings. Chain. When Soren landed, he shook his arm to shake off the frost that came into contact with it. Then, he directly picked up a heavy javelin and threw it at the white dragon's left wing. A sharp whistling sound. In the midst of the giant dragon's angry and painful roar, Soren hit its position near the dragon's wing bone. Spread out. 2 curved swords appeared in Soren's hands. The elite pirates in front of him were 3 less. This meant that someone didn't pass the test of draconic aura. This guy didn't dare to join the battle because he didn't have enough willpower. Soren wasn't too surprised by this. It was already good enough that so many of his men could withstand the first round of draconic aura. However, everyone had the courage to face such a huge monster. Roar. In the midst of the angry roar, the white dragon rushed toward Soren. As its huge body moved, according to Soren's strategy, the other elite pirates took the opportunity to continue attacking it with their javelins. Many of his men had already discovered the wound on the dragon's wings. The white dragon in front of them was indeed injured at the beginning. This discovery made many of the elite pirates eager to try. Some even pulled out their 2-handed weapons and prepared to hack at the open wound. Idiot. Don't be impulsive. Soren awkwardly rolled away. When he saw the scene behind him, he immediately shouted, "Get out of the way." Unfortunately, it was too late. The white dragon's attack on Soren was only half a feint. When the most cunning human in front of it dodged its dragon breath, it deliberately turned its back to those pesky insects and seemed to want to take the opportunity to sneak an attack on him. This made a cruel and bloodthirsty look appear in its eyes. As an adult white dragon with a certain amount of wisdom, it was very clear that it was better to get rid of these small fries first. Dragon tail sweep. The adult white dragon's tail was nearly 5 meters long, and the thickness was about the same as an adult's waist. Even the end of the tail was as thick as an adult's thigh. The dragon's tail was also covered with tough dragon scales. When the enemy behind it rushed over, it didn't even need to look back. Its huge dragon eyes moved, and then the thick and long dragon tail was raised high, like the fiercest and most domineering whip, lashing out. Bang! A violent impact sounded. A strong pirate closest to the adult white dragon was directly hit and flew back nearly 12 meters. At this distance, the entire tree trembled when he crashed into it. The others merely glanced at him, and discovered that this pirate's ribs had completely caved in. It was as though his entire body had sunk in, as though his chest had been folded in. This was an incomparably tyrannical force that had directly broken his spine. Killed in one blow. In this case, it was basically impossible to survive. Damn it. Soren took a deep breath, and a wisp of blood appeared in his eyes. His breathing began to become heavy, and his heartbeat gradually accelerated. His body temperature rose to nearly 50 degrees, and his heartbeat directly doubled. He dared to challenge a white dragon because this kind of dragon was relatively stupid, and like a beast, it was easy to be baited. However, the white dragon in front of him was obviously smarter. It actually knew that it was better to kill the others first, and it also judged that it would be difficult to kill Soren easily. Soren couldn't let all his men die here. Otherwise, in the end, he couldn't even drive the ship back. So he had to fight a tough battle with the adult white dragon in front of him. This kind of excitement of challenging a legendary creature made Soren's heart full of fighting spirit and excitement. Dragons were one of the few creatures that he studied the most. So when the white dragon in front of him turned its head to the back, and at the same time, there were obvious signs of its abdomen bulging, and its whole body showing signs of retreating, as if it was taking a deep breath, he couldn't help but shout, "Dodge! Be careful of the dragon breath!" Whoosh! A gust of wind blew. The bone-chilling dragon breath was sprayed out in a large area, covering an area of nearly 15 meters. In this all-shaped dragon breath, 2 elite pirates were enveloped in it. Then they saw that their bodies were frozen at a speed visible to the naked eye. This kind of cold was even more shocking than being directly exposed to the North Pole. It was almost as if their flesh and blood were frozen in just a second or two. Finally, their whole body was like an ice sculpture, completely wrapped in a layer of about 3 centimeters of ice. Boom! The thick and long dragon tail swept over with a whistling sound. The 2 elite pirates in front of it were like broken glass and porcelain, and directly shattered into pieces of flesh. There was not a drop of blood spilled because the blood had been turned into ice. In the blink of an eye, 3 of their companions died in the hands of the white dragon. The other pirates obviously showed a trace of fear, and nearly half of them took a few steps back. Because they found that the dragon was more difficult to deal with than they thought. Most of the people present were not very sure that they could withstand its attack. After all, this was a behemoth of more than 10 meters long and nearly 20 tons in weight. The height of a human was only 1.78 meters, and the weight was only about 200 pounds. This kind of difference in size. A casual blow was a crushing and fatal attack. However, at this moment, accompanied by the sound of clang, Soren wielded 2 curved swords at the same time from the sky, like a cheetah pouncing on the back of the white dragon. Sword form, spinning strike. Chapter 304. Roar. A dull roar sounded, as if it was in great pain. The adult white dragon's huge body could not help but tremble. Then it retracted its tail and swept towards Soren, who was on its back. Hot blood spilled out. Soren's 2 swords slashed on the white dragon's wing bone, almost creating a wound of more than 20 centimeters long. Traces of bones could be seen faintly. Even if the white dragon spat out ice dragon breath, its blood was already boiling hot. The temperature of the blood was close to 50 or 60 degrees, and it felt a little hot when it fell on the skin. The dragon's blood had a certain burning effect. The dragon's tail came with a whistling wind. Soren did not look back at all. He reached out and supported himself on the white dragon's back by listening to the wind. Then he turned and slid sideways to avoid the dragon's tail. The dragon's huge body provided him with enough attacking positions, and it also made it easier for him to dodge the enemy's attacks. In the eyes of many top rogues, it was safer to be within the dragon's body than to face it directly. Clang! Clang! 7 or 8 swords appeared in a row, and Soren slashed the white dragon's body one after another. It seemed that blood was splashing out, but the data that appeared in Soren's experience told him that this injury was not fatal because he only broke the white dragon's flesh layer. The swords did not even hurt the internal organs. It was difficult to kill an adult dragon in a short time with just a little bleeding damage. Activated sword form, heavy slash. Armor break attribute triggered. You've dealt 12, plus 3, slash damage to the target. Activated sword form, horizontal slash. Armor break attribute triggered. You've dealt 6+3 damage to the target. Soren's seemingly fierce attack actually caused quite limited damage because the dragon's scales were too strong. It almost offset most of Soren's damage. Unless he could hit the same spot continuously, which meant that after he broke the white dragon's scales, he could hit the same spot again. This way, he could cause more damage. But for Soren, who still had to dodge the white dragon's attack, this requirement was too high. Roar! The white dragon in front of him was finally angry and fed up with Soren, who was jumping up and down on its back. It gave up the majesty of the dragon and rolled over like a lazy donkey, trying to crush Soren directly under its huge body. However, this was obviously not going to work. Soren dodged the attack while the dragon's body was rolling to the side. Following that, he slashed at the white dragon's abdomen. The sound of metal scraping against metal could be heard, and sparks flew everywhere. Soren didn't even have the strength to break through the dragon's scales. Dragon scales were a metallic substance. All pure-blooded dragons had the habit of devouring metal ores, so most of their dragon scales were made of metal. Dragon scales were not like the scales of snakes and lizards, which had a structure similar to a cuticle. Therefore, Soren felt as if he was slashing at an extremely sturdy armor. Especially when the giant dragon swelled up, its incomparably strong muscles made it impossible for him to penetrate the dragon's scales and injure its vital areas. Dragon Wing Strike. A gust of wind blew. Soren dodged the attack by a hair's breadth, but he was still hit a little by the attack. After the white dragon forced Soren down with a roll, it immediately flapped its wings and slapped at him. The javelins that it threw at the beginning were starting to show their effect. When the giant dragon launched its attack, it directly tore a hole more than half a meter wide on the dragon's wings. Large amounts of blood gushed out. The damage caused by its own attack was even higher than when Soren first slashed it. At the very least, the dragon's wings on both sides were almost torn apart. Bang! Half of Soren's body was hit by the dragon's wings, and he was sent flying. The strong wind caused him to roll continuously. He gritted his teeth and swallowed the blood that had already reached his throat. Then, he stabbed his curved sword into the ground and curled up his body. The dragon wing strike was a very powerful attack. If one's body wasn't strong enough, they could be knocked unconscious. Soren didn't know if he was lucky or had good reflexes, but he barely dodged half of the attack, so his injury wasn't very serious. 1, 2, 3. Soren silently calculated the time. When the wind suddenly stopped, he suddenly got down on all fours like a 100-meter sprinter and pounced ferociously like a cheetah. This time, his explosive speed was quite amazing. It was almost as if he relied on the strength of his transformation to leap into the air. The smaller the size of the creature, the more amazing the jumping effect. Therefore, although the giant dragon's strength was quite amazing, its huge body didn't have much jumping ability. Sword form, beheading. Finally, Soren found the weakness of the white dragon after it launched the dragon wing strike. His eyes were bloodshot, and he directly slashed at the dragon's long and narrow neck. After a person launched an attack, there would be a short period of paralysis. The same was true for the giant dragon in front of him. It would take a deep breath before it launched the dragon breath, and there would be another deep breath after the dragon breath. As for the more lethal dragon wing strike, it was even more so. Soren had been waiting for an opportunity because most of the giant dragons would be paralyzed for about a second after the dragon wing strike. It was just like when you threw a punch forward with all your strength, it wasn't so easy to suddenly take back the strength. 1 second. For Soren now, it was enough. Clang. Soren's vigorous figure almost turned 360 degrees in the air, and directly slashed at the white dragon's neck with both hands. This time, the full-force attack finally broke through the dragon's scales. The force that was enough to cut through iron felt cut into the dragon's neck and then stuck at the neck bone. Soren never thought that he could cut off the dragon's head with one strike, unless he was a legendary berserk barbarian, so he immediately stepped back after hitting the white dragon's neck. Roar! A shrill cry was heard. The white dragon's thick neck swung violently, and directly used the dragon horn on its head to hit Soren's abdomen. Along with a muffled sound, a large amount of blood gushed out. The white dragon's ferocious strength had directly pierced through Soren's abdomen with its dragon horn. Not only was blood gushing out, even the intestines inside could be faintly seen. A ruthless row of data appeared, activated sword form, beheading. Beheading failed. You've dealt a heavy blow to the target. Target received 76/ damage. Target has entered a bleeding state. Pierced by dragon horn. You've received 69/ damage. You've entered a heavily injured state. You've entered a bleeding state. Plop. Soren's figure landed on the ground. He finally couldn't hold back the blood, and directly spat it out. He couldn't stop himself from coughing. If he remembered correctly, the strength attribute of an adult white dragon should be around 27 points. This terrifying strength was even more terrifying than many giants. Any casual attack could cause a terrible damage to the enemy. However, the injuries on the white dragon's body were not much better. Soren's attack hit its blood vessels, and it also entered a bleeding state. If it was just the two of them, the chances of the white dragon winning in the end would be higher. However, Soren was not the only one present. How could one fight a dragon alone? Without absolute confidence, not many people would do this. Attack. Soren struggled to stand up. A faint light of magic appeared in his hand, and then he saw a portal connecting to the earth elemental plane. Then, an earth elemental appeared in front of him. As Soren slashed the neck of the white dragon, the other pirates regained a lot of courage. He took a step back and said in a deep voice, "Attack it from all sides, it's about to die." In fact, the adult white dragon in front of them still had more than half of its HP, and its combat power was still very strong. However, Soren needed to give his men courage and confidence, so he had to give them the illusion that the dragon was about to die. Only in this way could they continue to fight, because pirates were the profession that liked to take advantage of the situation. Fighting against the wind would not allow them to burst out with their strongest combat power. A bottle of healing potion was poured into his mouth. Soren pressed the wound on his abdomen with his hand and simply bandaged it. In fact, he used the bandage to quickly strangle the wound, and stop the bleeding in the simplest and most violent way. It looked like the injury was shocking. However, Soren's combat power did not decrease too much, because he now had a physique beyond that of mortals. Compared to the time when he was stabbed in the heart in Port Tylon, this injury was not worth mentioning at all. Swoosh! A round of javelins was thrown. Some brave pirates attacked the white dragon from all sides, although 2 more people died in just a minute. However, they could obviously find that the dragon's reaction speed was not so fast. Soren hit its neck bone, which made it difficult for it to turn its head. Its huge body made it difficult for it to avoid attacks. The almost cracked dragon wings on its back also affected its movements. Unless someone helped it pull off all the barbed javelins on its wings, it would not be able to move easily. Vampiric touch. Just when the adult white dragon in front of him took a deep breath and was about to launch the dragon's breath again, Soren suddenly rushed up and gently tapped his finger on it. A light of divinity emerged. The white dragon's body stiffened for about half a second, and the dragon's breath also stopped for a moment. Then, a pure life force rushed into Soren's body. As a special spell produced by weak divinity, Vampiric Touch should be the most difficult ability for Soren to successfully resist. This was like a killing move that directly took away 60 points of the adult white dragon's life force, and then transferred it to Soren's body. His injury recovered rapidly. However, the white dragon's injury had been dragged into a state of serious injury. Soren retained nearly 90% of his combat power, but the white dragon's life force was still reduced by nearly half, and 1/3 of the pirates who were responsible for harassment around them died. The balance of the battle had begun to tilt toward Soren's side. Chapter 305. A series of roars echoed in the air. The white dragon's angry roar could not hide the fact that more and more wounds were appearing on its body. Although the seemingly tall earth elemental was very small in front of it, this sturdy elemental was still able to withstand 3 of its attacks. With just these 3 opportunities to resist the dragon's claws, Soren left 3 more wounds on the white dragon's abdomen, back and back. At the same time, the nearby elite pirates also seized the opportunity to strike it several times. These pirates were all level 5 and above. Although they could not directly challenge the dragon, they could still attack and harass it. Dragon tail sweep. The thick and long dragon tail swept over like a whip. Soren rolled to avoid it, and the strong wind blew past his cheek. Although he avoided the attack, the tall earth elemental was not so lucky. In the end, it was broken into pieces. Even if it was a grade 4 elemental, it could only withstand 3 or 4 attacks from the white dragon. Fortunately, the white dragon in front of him was getting slower and weaker. Soren's continuous attacks had already dragged it into a state of serious injury. The pirates under Soren's command suffered heavy casualties. Although he was only seriously injured in the abdomen, nearly half of his men were killed. Even Soren's constitution could not withstand a few attacks from the adult white dragon. Any one of them would either die or be seriously injured. Fog. With more and more wounds on its body, the adult white dragon's eyes finally showed a trace of fear because it realized that it might die in the hands of these puny humans. It wanted to fly away, but its dragon wings were broken. The heavy javelin hooked on them, and every time it moved its wings, it could feel a stinging pain. A dense fog appeared on the battlefield. Soren was very alert and took a few steps back, while carefully watching the enemy in front of him. The adult white dragon had the ability to cast spells. The fog covered a large area. This fog was like a foggy weather in winter. It almost covered a radius of hundreds of meters, and it was difficult to see clearly beyond 5 meters. There was a scream. It was the voice of one of Soren's men. After the scream, there was the sound of bones being broken. What's going on? Soren frowned as he stared at the white dragon in front of him. Are there other monsters nearby? What other helpers does it have? Suddenly, Soren sensed that something was amiss. He immediately dashed towards the white dragon that was shrouded in mist. Soren's scimitar slashed towards the white dragon's head, but it didn't feel like it was cutting through flesh. It felt like he was slashing at air. Illusion. Soren immediately felt that something was wrong. He immediately rushed towards the source of the screams. It wanted to run away. Soren saw his subordinates being bitten into 2 halves. At the same time, he also saw the white dragon trying to escape from the fog. He didn't know what spell it used, but it was able to erase the sound of its movement. It seemed to be an area of effect silence spell. The white dragon fled in the direction that Soren had come from. However, Soren had come from the side, while the white dragon seemed to have fled from the front. That was where the group of aborigines appeared. Not good. Soren's heart skipped a beat. He immediately cast the level 1 spell, Instant Slither, on himself. This was a weakened version of Haste. Soren's time to learn spells was still too short, so he could only start with low-grade spells. Learning high-level spells was too time-consuming. Instant Slither lasted for less than a minute, but it was enough for Soren to catch up with the adult white dragon in front of him. It seemed that it really had something to do with the aborigines. Shadow Strike. Sword form, horizontal slash. Soren's figure flew out and slashed the abdomen of the white dragon in front of him with his scimitar. With a splash of dragon blood, its huge body shook slightly. Its injuries had begun to affect its movements. Even the dragon's physique was gradually declining after severe bleeding and injury. Now it was close to death, so it wanted to escape. Soren couldn't let it escape. He used nearly half of his subordinates to seriously injure it to the point of death. How could he let it escape like this? These injuries were piled up with the lives of his subordinates. If the white dragon escaped like this, Soren would not only lose his prestige, but also let down his subordinates who fought to the death. Slaying the dragon must not be stopped halfway. Otherwise, if the dragon was given time to breathe, its injuries would quickly recover. It seemed that there was really a gathering place of the Aborigines in front, because Soren heard a summoning dragon roar, and then saw a commotion in the distance. It was trying to summon the Aborigines. The edge of life and death had made it give up the pride of the dragon race. The white dragon was summoning the despicable Aborigines who served it to help it fight. Evade sight. Shadow jump. Soren obviously felt that something was wrong. His figure disappeared in an instant, and then the shadow under a big tree in front of him twisted. Within a range of 100 meters, as long as Soren had enough control, he could appear in any shadow. The position where Soren appeared was just in front of the white dragon. His eyes were full of dense blood vessels. The moment his figure came out of the shadow, he immediately jumped up and swung his sword at the white dragon's head. Sword form, beheading. Soren's figure fell from the sky, and his curved sword slashed at the white dragon's neck, which happened to be the place where it first slashed. This time, the beheading attack was powerful. It almost slammed the white dragon's head down, but it didn't cut off the white dragon's head. Instead, it let out a cry and its huge body fell to the ground. The curved sword slashed into the neck bone. Although it didn't cut off the white dragon's head, it cut the bone in half. Soren caused nearly 100 points of heavy damage, and directly pushed it to the edge of death. Sword form, beheading. There was a rustling sound in the distance. It seemed that there were indigenous people approaching. Soren didn't think much at all. After taking a breath, he once again swung his sword at the white dragon's head. A stream of blood gushed out. Soren finally cut off the white dragon's head with the third sword form, beheading. The white dragon in front of him finally died completely. At the same time, a large amount of blood gushed out and sprinkled on Soren's body, making him feel a burning pain. But he didn't leave. Instead, he let the dragon's blood cover his whole body. It was as if his whole body was soaked in the dragon's blood. This was a special baptism ritual, and it was possible to gain additional power. But it had to be effective when the dragon was just killed. Among them, there was a kind of people who would have their ability improved called dragon's descendants, which was the dragon disciple and the half-dragon. This process was like Vivian absorbing divinity, but in this case, she absorbed the special power of the dragon. Others who had undergone the dragon's blood baptism might also receive additional enhancements in their abilities. For example, the dragon's blood could make the part of their body as hard as iron, innate defense +1, or the dragon's blood could strengthen their physique +1, and other possible baptism effects. This process required a certain amount of luck. The hot blood covered Soren's body. Some of the burning sensation didn't make him step back. The dragon's blood would only be so hot when the dragon had just died. It wouldn't take long for the dragon's blood to gradually cool down or even solidify. And in order to give people additional power and possibly inherit part of the dragon's power, it must be this kind of hot dragon's blood. The dragon's blood dyed Soren's whole body red. The rustling sound in the distance was getting closer and closer, and then the figures of the natives appeared a few hundred meters away. They saw Soren in the distance, and also saw the dead white dragon. Then they let out a strange cry of horror and fled into the distance like a swarm of bees. A faint glimmer of divinity appeared. As the adult white dragon's body stopped twitching, a little bit of divine light invisible to the naked eye appeared and fell on Soren's body. A row of data appeared, activated sword form, beheading. You've dealt 56 points of critical damage to the target. Beheading successful. You've successfully killed the adult white dragon. Extracting the target's soul energy. You've received 56,000 slaughter EXP. The target is a divine creature. Extracting the target's divine power. Extraction successful. You've received 1 point of divinity. Little by little, divinity fell on Soren's body. Just when he was very surprised that the adult white dragon in front of him actually had 1 point of divinity, the lucky gold coin on his body also emitted a faint light, and then he saw that the dragon's blood that covered his body seemed to have a trace of heat flowing into his body. It was some kind of invisible power that gradually penetrated into Soren's body, allowing him to inherit part of the pure-blood dragon's power. Another row of data appeared. You've received the Dragon's Blood Baptism ceremony. You've received part of the dragon's power. You've inherited part of the dragon's power. Baptism successful. You've received an additional background ability, Dragon's Blood Baptism LV1. Dragon's Blood Baptism LV1, special ability. You successfully killed an adult white dragon. After completing this dragon-slaying feat, you've received the first Dragon's Blood Baptism. This baptism has strengthened your body and allowed you to inherit part of the dragon's power. The dragon's blood has made you stronger, and also made your skin tougher. You've permanently received 1 point of natural armor and an additional 1 point of toughness. This ability can be gradually improved with the number of Dragon's Blood Baptism. Natural armor +1, toughness +1. Note, the Dragon's Blood Baptism can be performed at the same time as the blood purification ceremony. Chapter 306. Drops of dragon blood slid down Soren's cheeks. He now looked like he was covered in blood. The warm dragon blood gradually cooled down after coming into contact with his body, but traces of heat seeped into his skin and then gradually flowed into his body through his blood vessels. Soren felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness all over his body. This feeling was both familiar and strange to him. It was a feeling that was difficult to describe with words, but many people had experienced it before. When one's mouth was dry and one's heart was in a mess, one would have a desire for the opposite sex. Dragon blood had the effect of stimulating sexual desire. Or it should be said that the flesh and blood of dragons generally had aphrodisiac effects. This was also the reason why many nobles in the continent were very keen on the flesh and blood of pure-blooded dragons, especially the penis. Some were even willing to pay tens of thousands of kindler to buy it. The flesh and blood of most dragons, including some sub-dragons, had a strong aphrodisiac effect. The specific reason was not clear, but it might have something to do with the dragon's lust, because many sub-dragons appeared because of this. Note, there are hundreds of sub-dragons, including half-dragons and so on. However, it seemed that the only thing that could make the dragons wilt in this aspect was the drows of the Underdark. For many dragons, falling into the hands of the drows was definitely a nightmare. As for the reason, those who knew would smile slightly. This familiar yet unfamiliar heat made Soren's mouth dry up. It was as if he had lost control of his body, and his blood vessels were surging. This was a feeling that Soren hated because he had always been a very rational and calm person, and at the same time, he had great control of his body. But now, he felt like he had been fed an aphrodisiac. He could suppress it with his will, but his body was reacting instinctively, so he had to use his will to suppress this restlessness. A scorching heat spread through his body, and after flowing through Soren's body, it finally rushed to his heart. Thump thump thump. The sound of a strong heartbeat could be heard. Soren's heartbeat gradually accelerated. It was not as fast as when he transformed into a slaughterer, but slowly increased little by little. The strong heartbeat was like a heavy drum, sending blood to every part of his body. It even made him feel as if his blood was rushing to his head, stimulating the secretion of adrenaline. This state lasted for about 3 minutes, and Soren's body gradually cooled down. His body temperature returned from 40 degrees Celsius to a normal human's temperature, and the heat also slowly subsided. Desire can affect you. But as long as you can control it, you can eventually control it. Soren finally recovered completely. The restlessness in all aspects subsided, and his body quieted down. At this moment, the sound of the pirates rushing over could be heard from behind. When they saw the decapitated dragon on the ground, they couldn't help but smile excitedly, and then they cheered loudly. They looked at Soren with eyes full of awe and worship. The slightly thin figure in front of them stood under the huge dragon's corpse, his whole body dripping with blood like a demon god, and even made them want to worship him like a god. But this feeling only lasted for a short time, and when they turned their eyes to the dragon's nest, their eyes were immediately filled with greed and desire. Pirates were always a greedy bunch. Slaying a dragon. This was not only an honor, but also an incomparably rich reward. Soren turned around and looked at the elite pirates behind him. He slightly frowned and said in a deep voice, "Oh, Sea Dog, go back and call the people on the ship over. Fat Fish, you take half of the people and stay here to guard. Don't touch the dragon's corpse, we'll deal with it later. The rest of you, follow me back to the dragon's nest. This time, everyone will be rewarded handsomely." A gust of cold wind blew past. The dragon's blood on Soren's body had dried up, and the feeling was very uncomfortable. It was as if a person's whole body was covered in scabs after bleeding. Soren raised his hand and brushed his body to get rid of the dried blood. After the scabs peeled off from his arm, his white skin was exposed. It was as if he had received a restoration spell, and the small wounds on Soren's skin had mostly disappeared. The dragon's blood baptism strengthened the toughness of Soren's skin, and this change was equivalent to a restoration of his skin. The group of people moved towards the dragon's nest, and at this time, Soren had the time to look at the other data displayed: dragon slaying successful. You've successfully slain an adult dragon. You've received part of the information of the epic background ability, Dragon Slayer LVL1. Dragon slaying successful. You've successfully slain an adult dragon. The pirates under your command have received additional willpower in the process of challenging the dragon. All survivors have permanently increased willpower by 1 point. All survivors have permanently increased morale by 1 point. The effect is equivalent to the first circle divine spell, boosting spirit. Dragon slaying battle, White Dragon, legendary battle, New Moon year 1676, early January. When you went to the north to invite the witches to the outer islands, you were attacked by northern pirates. You easily defeated these enemies and at the same time captured a large number of captives. In the process of interrogating the captives, you accidentally learned about an injured white dragon. In the end, you led your men to search for the traces of the white dragon, and killed the adult white dragon on an unknown island. With your return, the pirates under your command will spread this story to even further places. Legend level +3, an adult white dragon with divinity. During the process of returning to the dragon's nest, Soren's mind was constantly thinking about this question. That was, why did the adult white dragon he killed have divinity? It didn't seem like it had a noble bloodline. There were only a few pure-blooded dragons that were born with divinity. For example, the offspring of a 5-headed dragon that guarded the front line of the Abyss Bloody War. But the offspring of that kind of existence was probably not weaker than the son of Dagon, so the possibility of the adult white dragon inheriting divinity was quite low. If it wasn't inherited divinity, then it meant that the source of its divinity was more special. The most likely reason was, it was the same as the spirits in the outer islands, and it had a trace of divinity because of the native barbarians' worship. This possibility was quite high, but what Soren couldn't understand was that spirits were half-energy lifeforms, and dragons were flesh and blood lifeforms. In his past memory, it seemed that there were very few dragons that obtained divinity in this way. Even many legendary professions couldn't rely on this method to obtain divinity. There seemed to be something hidden in this. Unfortunately, Soren was not qualified to decipher the domain of the gods, so naturally, he couldn't understand the way divinity was condensed. But he could vaguely guess something. He just didn't know if it was right or wrong. But Soren remembered the abnormalities of the adult white dragon that he encountered today. He felt that this information would be very useful to him in the future. Native people. What was the difference between them and the population on the mainland? Why was it so difficult for the population on the mainland to provide a source of divinity for certain existences, but the native people in the outer islands could continuously provide spirits with divinity? What was the reason for this? There seemed to be a fog in front of Soren's eyes, but he couldn't see through this fog. After killing the adult white dragon, a large number of data appeared. Soren's basic skills had increased by nearly 15 points, especially the roll skill, which increased the most. Soren didn't feel surprised that he got 3 legendary points, because dragon slaying was one of the fastest ways to gain legendary points, and this was because he killed a dragon in the outer islands. If he killed a dragon on the mainland, he would probably get around 5 points. As for the Dragon Slayer LVL1 ability, Soren still had some understanding of it. It was an epic level ability. It was a very simple ability. Dragon Slayer LV1, Epic Specialty. Background: this is a special background specialty obtained after becoming an epic legend. Your existence will become similar to an astral traveler, a dimensional explorer, and a space pioneer, which others will look up to. However, this kind of background ability is more often obtained by some epic melee professions, and not those powerful spellcasters. This kind of background ability has incredible power, but it requires some special conditions to complete it. Current progress: killed an adult white dragon, achieved; killed an adult black dragon, not achieved; killed an adult green dragon, not achieved; killed an adult blue dragon, not achieved; killed an adult red dragon, not achieved. Note: after killing the evil faction's Pentashade dragon, the second stage of the epic ability advancement will be unlocked. It was a very difficult epic ability. Even Soren couldn't complete it when he was at his peak, because slaying a dragon required not only strength but also luck. If you wanted to meet a dragon, you had to be able to defeat it. It was easier to find a dragon now, but when the Age of Chaos began, even giant dragons would learn to hide with their tails between their legs. At that time, it would be more difficult to find a giant dragon. However, if you wanted to find a god who had transformed into a saint, it would be very easy. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to defeat them. Those who dared to transform into a saint were basically gods who were close to the power of a great god. Some of them were at the level of the main gods. Soren could guess a little about this epic ability, but he wasn't completely sure. This was because any epic ability, even if it was a background ability, was quite difficult. It could be said that the difficulty of this ability was much more difficult than the Death Walker that Soren was currently working on. He could only wait and see if there was a chance in the future to find all the Pentashade dragons of the evil faction. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.